used to go bowling quite often with my friends when I was young. I'm talking like 12, 13. There was a bowling alley down the block from my friends and I, and so we'd go there on weekends. The bowling alley has been closed for years, but when it was open, it was super cheap and affordable, perfect for a bunch of young teenagers who didn't have money of their own. This one weekend, I went with my friends Jacob, Josh, and Mikey to the bowling alley. We always went at night. It was likely around 8 p.m. The bowling alley was always crowded on the weekends, and sometimes we'd see familiar faces. There was this older man who would sometimes be there alone, bowling on the adult side of the bowling alley where alcohol was served. We always played on the non-alcoholic side. How we took notice to that man was because he'd sometimes just weirdly walk down the entire bowling alley, passing every lane, watching people bowling. Then we'd notice him end up back at his lane all by himself. We nicknamed him Creeper Bob after maybe the third time seeing him. Tonight there was a lane open next to us, and guess who out of nowhere sat next to us? Bob, or whatever his real name was, but I'll keep referring to him as Bob. He was setting up a game on the lane next to us by himself, and it wasn't long until he started trying to talk to us. He started making comments on our form, and every so often interrupting our conversation to tell us weird things like how long he's been coming here. Then eventually he said something really weird, that he watches us play every weekend from across the bowling alley, and he decided to come over and introduce himself tonight. He played it off like he was trying to be some kind of bowling teacher to us, but really it was just annoying and most of all uncomfortable. Bob at one point entered our lane as I was up to bowl, and he grabbed my wrist with his hands to position me into an allegedly better form. I never gave him permission to touch me, nor did I ask for his guidance. We were only like 13 though. None of us stood up and said, "Yo, get lost," or something like that. I could just feel the unease amongst my friends. Every moment of that man touching me, I felt more and more disgusted. We cut our night at the bowling alley short because of him. We used the money that we would have used on more games on getting pizza instead at a pizza place further out the block. When we came out, Jacob and Mikey went their own ways since they lived on a different block. Josh and I walked back down the other way in the direction of our houses. As we did, the sound of a car engine starting made us turn around. We noticed an old SUV like a Ford Explorer banging a three-point turn. We both imagined the possibility of it being Creeper Bob. The SUV started slowly tailing us as we walked down the street, so we picked up our pace. Then the SUV pulled up right alongside us, and the window rolled down. It was in fact the man from the bowling alley. He said out the window that he could offer us a ride home. We said no thanks. He replied it's not safe for a couple kids to be walking around late at night. We weren't even really that young. We were young teenagers, not little kids, and it was crazy that he thought we were young enough to trick into getting into a car. When we made it clear we weren't getting in, he pulled to the side of the road and parked his car. Josh and I decided to start jogging home. When we reached the intersection where we'd split off, we said bye and I continued jogging home. By the time I made it back, I was out of breath. Running after eating pizza is not a good idea. My dad was already asleep because he worked weekends. My mom was out with her girlfriends most likely, and the same was probably the case with my sister, so I wasn't supposed to ring the bell because my dad didn't want to be woken up. I went around back to get the key we had for the back door, which was hidden in the shed. When I got out from the shed, I thought I heard something, and I should have listened to my gut. I went to the back door to unlock it, and as I opened the door, I heard the sound of someone running up behind me. Before I could fully turn around, someone pushed me inside the house, covering my mouth and wrapping their arm around my neck. I wasn't able to see who it was because I couldn't turn my head. I scratched and clawed at the man's hand until I could move my mouth just enough out of the grip of his hand and scream, "Dad." I may have only been 13, but I was able to put up enough of a fight to get him to lose his grip a few times, allowing me to scream. This undoubtedly scared him off as he finally let go for good and ran outside. I didn't look back. I ran up the half flight of stairs to the main floor and yelled for my dad. My dad came rushing out of his room, and after telling him what just happened, he checked the backyard and all around the property and then came back inside. I told him about the man from the bowling alley, how we nicknamed him Creeper Bob, how he followed Josh and I in his SUV after admitting to stalking us at the bowling alley. My dad filed a police report and tried getting the bowling alley to release the video surveillance from that night, but they refused. I was never allowed to go back there after my mom found out about this. Not that I'd ever want to. The crazy thing is, technically I can't say with 100% certainty that the man who came in behind me and grabbed me was the man from the bowling alley. But realistically, how slim are the chances that it wasn't him? When I was a teenager, my close group of friends were, I guess, what you'd call delinquents. We liked causing trouble, breaking rules, and messing around in places we didn't belong. I grew up in a suburb in northern New Jersey, so I guess you could say we were just spoiled kids with nothing better to do. Looking back, the way we passed the time was a little silly, but there's nothing I can do about that now. Anyway, one of the things we really liked to do was to go exploring in the late hours of the night. Usually we explored abandoned buildings, but not always. We actually got banned from our middle school after jumping through an open window, but that's a story for another time. This particular night, we were planning on executing a riskier task. There were 5 of us: me, Chip, Jason, Rowan, and Anish. Rowan had a tendency to bounce around from job to job, which was kind of a running joke in our squad. He'd lose jobs as quickly as he'd get them, usually for the dumbest reasons you can imagine. He had just picked up a gig as an attendant at a bowling alley a few towns over from us. I'm sure you could see where this is going. He had been entrusted the key to close up the place the night before. Anish was a master of persuasion, and he somehow convinced Rowan to let us explore the bowling alley at like 3 a.m. I'm telling you, Anish could convince someone to give them their kidney. That's how persistent he was. I haven't heard from him in a while. I think he might actually be in jail right now. Anyway, the 5 of us agreed to get a little drunk before going. We all had a substantial amount to drink except for Jason, who refused to go anywhere unless he was the one driving. His dad had a really nice BMW, and Jason liked being able to end our links when he got tired. After getting a little buzzed, James drove the 5 of us to the location. I was the heavy drinker of the squad. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's just who I was at that point in my life. Because of this, I usually took things a little less seriously than I should have, especially when it came to dangerous or risky situations. Rowan unlocked the door, and the 5 of us made our way inside. Chip was usually the most cautious, and he kept chiding us to be careful in his hilariously high-pitched voice. Rowan told us we couldn't actually do any bowling right now, which we were all a little upset about. I had the genius idea of doing some makeshift sliding on the lanes as if they were slip-and-slides. Since we were drunk, this was actually pretty fun. The 5 of us soon tired ourselves out and decided we wanted to do some exploring. We asked Rowan if there were any back rooms we could check out, and he told us there were. We made our way into the employee-only area, and Rowan led us to some kind of storage room. We started poking around and flipping things over, just being stupid and careless. We figured Rowan was going to get fired anyway, so we weren't too concerned with messing things up. As we started getting bored, we heard a deafening bump from below us. The 5 of us froze, staring at each other. Jason, the only sober one in the group, asked if the place had a basement. Rowan looked just as shocked as we were, and told that he had no prior knowledge of a potential basement. Anish grinned, eager to continue exploring. Chip seemed really nervous, telling us that we were probably going to end up getting Rowan fired. We were whispering now, arguing whether we wanted to go look for this hypothetical basement. Just then, Jason lifted the edge of a rug nestled in the corner, revealing a hatch. We were shocked. The atmosphere in the room instantly shifted with the realization that the situation was now serious. Even if we had found the way into the basement, the sound we heard was still unexplained. I don't think any of us really wanted to go down there, but Jason made the first move in his classic level-headed style. He flung the latch open and stared down at the old, rusted ladder leading into the darkness. "Screw this," whispered Chip, motioning for us to leave. Jason ignored him and went for the stairs. He pulled out his phone and shined the flashlight into the blackness. Without another word, he descended into the abyss. I could tell Rowan, Anish, and Chip were a little scared, understandably. I still had a lot of liquid confidence, so I decided I'd go next. Anish followed behind me and Rowan brought up the rear. Chip refused to come down with us. The 4 of us pulled out our phone flashlights and began exploring the basement that had been hidden for some reason. It was filled with dust and cardboard boxes, stacked up to the ceiling. There was nothing else down there, or at least that's what we originally thought. Anish noticed a door in the corner, and we walked over to it. Jason put his hand on the handle, but a split second before he was going to open it, we heard a distinctive bump come from the other side, which sounded identical to the one we heard earlier. We looked around at each other, with horrified looks on our faces. I could tell we were all thinking the same thing. An animal, maybe? No shot, it was too loud to be an animal. I was pretty freaked out at this point and turned away to leave. Like an idiot, Jason cracked the door open, revealing another storage room. That's not all that was in there, though. In the corner of the room, there was a human figure sitting on the ground with its legs crossed, facing away from us. We were frozen in place, utterly terrified. After a full minute of stagnance, the person in the corner of the room banged their head against the wall, explaining the sounds we had been hearing. I began tiptoeing to the ladder, careful not to make any noise. The rest of my friends turned around and began doing the same, clearly filled with terror. Just then, Rowan tripped on a piece of junk on the floor and then cursed. The person in the room yelled, and we ran. Jason and I were up the ladder in a split second, with Anish close behind. Chip was leaned over the hatch, concerned with what he was hearing. Anish made it up, and the three of us ran out of the room. We heard Rowan scream, "Get off me!" but Anish and Jason were too terrified to turn back. I ran back into the room and saw Chip chucking a metal pipe down the hatch, which was followed by a demonic scream. Rowan scrambled on the ladder, and Chip grabbed his wrist, yanking him up. Rowan ran toward me while Chip slammed the hatch shut. The five of us sprinted out of the bowling alley, and Rowan hastily locked the door with trembling hands. Jason drove us back with a blank look on his face. We listened as Rowan described what happened after the rest of us made it up the ladder. Apparently, whoever had been in the basement jumped on Rowan's back, clawing at him. Chip came to his rescue and nailed Rowan's attacker in the head with that pipe, causing the lunatic to fall backward. Rowan said he only saw the guy's face for a split second. It was the horrifying face of a dirty, old, homeless-looking guy with a bird's nest of hair on his head. Rowan ended up quitting the next day without giving his boss an explanation, as it was definitely illegal what we had done. To this day, we have no idea how that guy could have gotten down there. Maybe there was an alternate entrance we had overlooked. Either way, the basement had been intentionally hidden, which tells me that Rowan's boss might have known something about the whole thing. This experience ruined my taste for bowling, which I have not done since. One night, my girlfriend Rebecca and I decided it would be fun to go bowling. We drove to the closest bowling alley and went through the whole process of renting shoes, finding balls, and picking a lane. We both were really bad. Neither of us had been bowling in many years. We paid for an hour of bowling. Rebecca wasn't really enjoying it too much because she kept getting gutter balls. I was doing better than her, but not by much, so I wasn't really able to help her out much. And then to make matters even worse, Rebecca's ex-boyfriend arrived with his group of friends and they started bowling a few lanes down from us. Rebecca looked away, refusing to even look in that direction, whispering at me that we need to leave now. We packed it up early and left. She went to the car and waited while I returned the shoes. I think her ex spotted me while I was at the front counter, and I looked away. I didn't tell Rebecca this though. We went home and agreed to play Wii bowling instead and have some wine. That sounded much more fun anyway. When we got home, the first thing I did was turn on the Wii and open a bottle of wine. The bowling alley trip was a failure, but I didn't want Rebecca to be unhappy. We played Wii bowling for like half an hour with music on in the background and drinking wine. It turned out to be much more fun than the bowling alley. Until the current song that was playing ended, and we heard something come from upstairs in that brief moment of silence. Rebecca and I looked at each other, telling me she heard it too. I turned off the music for good, but now there was just silence. The sound we heard could best be described as a heavy object being dropped on the floor. I went upstairs to investigate. I checked every bedroom with the lights on. I checked under every bed. I was relieved to find nothing. I wasn't actually expecting to find someone in the house, but naturally you do need to go investigate if you hear a suspicious sound in your house. Still, I wondered what actually made the sound because I didn't find anything on the floor. After maybe another half an hour of playing Wii bowling, We brought our little wine party upstairs to the bedroom, and eventually we fell asleep. Rebecca's a lightweight, so she got much drunker than me, which explains why I was the one to wake up in the middle of the night and not her. I heard what woke me up though. It was another clear and distinct sound of something heavy being dropped from above. But the only thing is, now we were upstairs, and yet the sound still came from above. So what else would be above us? The attic. The attic door is right outside my bedroom door. It's one of those doors with a string that you pull down and a metal ladder comes down. I tiptoed out of the bedroom to not wake up Rebecca. I stood under the attic door and listened. Every 5 seconds or so, I heard the slightest creaking sound, like from the weight of something moving around. I didn't want to scare Rebecca, but I'd heard of animals getting into people's attics sometimes. I went to get a broom from the closet to use as a possible weapon if I were to have to fend off an animal. Then I quietly pulled the attic door open and climbed up. I stopped at the top of the ladder in the darkness and listened. I heard creaking. It was the creaking of the wooden rocking chair we had up there. I used my phone as a light to reveal the rocking chair. There was someone sitting in it, slowly rocking. I nearly fell off the ladder. I wanted to go run back to Rebecca and hide. I wanted to do anything but approach this person. But I gathered the courage to yell, "Who are you?" The rocking stopped, and the man turned around to look at me. He started making this animalistic, gargling, growling sound. Then he got up, and that's when I hurried down the ladder and pushed the attic door up. I screamed for Rebecca to call the cops until I heard her acknowledge me. I stayed under the attic door, preventing it from being opened as the man in the attic tried kicking the door open. He eventually stopped, and I heard the deranged laughter of a sick, mentally ill person. He spoke in another language. It sounded Russian. I felt like my arms were going to fall off, holding up the attic door, waiting for the police. When they finally arrived, Rebecca went downstairs to let them in. From here, it was the job of the police officers to go up there and remove the man. Rebecca and I waited in the living room, sitting on the couch next to each other, until we saw them bringing the man out through the living room to the front door in handcuffs. The way the man looked at me said everything. He was a dangerous, mentally ill person. His stare was full of hatred and craziness, with a hint of confusion. His lip contorted in this bizarre way that would almost make you think he were drunk. Whatever happened with him, we don't know. We didn't press civil charges, but I'm sure he was charged criminally if they didn't deem him to be insane. This happened in the summertime when we keep the windows open, and so it was most likely that he squeezed through one of the windows in the backyard. I'm not sure why he picked our house. We may just have been the unlucky house he stumbled across. This happened to me back in late November of 2024 when I was 18. I was at the Walden Galleria Mall in Buffalo, just doing some early Christmas shopping for my family. I like to get my Christmas shopping over with. I also like going to the mall during Christmas time because of the decorations and general vibe. Something about shopping when that Christmas feeling is in the air makes it more enjoyable to me. I had like 3 bags with me already. I stopped in Victoria's Secret, Zara, and Sephora. I got my brother and dad something from Zara, and my sister and mom stuff from Sephora. I also got myself a bunch of stuff. I'd already been in the mall for hours, and I wanted to just sit and collect myself. I sat on one of the benches not far from the tall tree that the mall puts up every year. There were still people in the mall, but it was closing soon, so there were less and less with each passing minute. A man came and sat down next to me. He cracked a joke at first, which I laughed at. He seemed like this innocent older guy, like 62 or something. He reminded me, honestly, of a skinny Santa Claus, ironically. We talked for a couple of minutes. The things he said that mainly stuck out to me were him talking about how he'd been coming to this mall since it opened, and how he was scared it was going to shut down. He said I looked like his daughter, and then showed me a picture of her on his phone. I didn't see a resemblance at all, to be honest. In fact, the girl looked absolutely nothing like me, or him for that matter. It was also a picture of a girl who looked like she was 18. He looked like he could have been her grandfather, honestly. Eventually, I felt it was time to leave, so I slightly awkwardly got up and said goodbye and walked away. I didn't look back to see if he was watching me. I like to avoid awkwardness in every way. I got to my car and started my drive home. I live only about 10 minutes from the mall. My family has several homes, and it's often that I'm alone with just my brother in this house. This was one of those spans of time. This night was a Thursday, I believe. My brother goes to University of Buffalo and often goes out Thursday nights. This night was no exception. Our house is in a cul-de-sac with two other big houses, and when I turned right into the cul-de-sac, I looped around to our house. This cul-de-sac is unusual. It isn't one big open court. It has a circular patch of grass with some trees in the middle, so it more so resembles a roundabout. Around this time, right before pulling into the driveway, I got a message on my phone. It said, "AirTag found moving with you." I panicked, but instead of pulling into the driveway, I looped around and drove back down the street, just in case I was being tracked. I had to make sure this AirTag was actually in or on my car. I figured out how to make the AirTag make a noise, and partially expecting it to come from the outside of the car, I heard a beeping sound coming from one of my shopping bags. I dug through the bag and pulled out an AirTag, actually feeling like throwing up. I put the car back in drive and drove further down the block where I chucked the AirTag out the window. Then I turned around and floored it back to the house. I drove into the driveway and ran inside where I opened the garage, hoping to hide the car in there, but my mom's car was in there. I had no choice but to leave the car outside. I closed the garage door and locked the front door. I called my brother Cody for safe measures, just letting him know what happened. He said if anyone comes to the house, call him. Him saying that alone scared me, especially hearing in his tone that he wasn't kidding, but he also sounded kinda drunk. I went to the living room and tried to just take my mind off of it, but I wouldn't have written this if that's where it ended. The sound of the doorbell made me sick immediately. It was like in the back of my mind I was dreading it, and it happened. Followed by the doorbell was 3 loud, distinct knocks. I slowly walked over to the door, like tiptoeing, and I stopped when a slightly muffled man's voice on the other side said, "Hey Ashley, I think you might have my AirTag." And it all hit me instantly. It was that man from the mall. He probably purposely threw his AirTag into my Sephora bag to stalk me home. He saw me through the textured glass. When I guess he saw me hurrying away, I heard him yell that he promises he dropped the AirTag in there by accident. I didn't listen to a word he said. Even if he was telling the truth, the AirTag wasn't in my house and he'd have seen that. It meant he saw me go to the house and that's all he wanted. I called Cody again, and at first he thought I was joking, but when he heard I was serious, he said he was on his way home. The downtown bars are not far away, so I'd only have to wait maybe 10 minutes. When I peeked back at the door, I could no longer see the man through the glass. Maybe he was gone, I thought. I went to the living room and turned on the TV to drown out the silence. I was trying not to think about the man at the door. I just waited for Cody, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I looked over, but now I didn't see anything. I sat there trying to convince myself there was nothing. Maybe the man left. Somehow, I did briefly convince myself of that. But after a minute or two of watching TV, I heard the same voice from outside that window say, "I love it when they play dumb." I looked, and he was standing right outside the window, his face pressed against the glass. He smiled when he saw me notice him. It was that old man from the mall. He lifted his hand and tapped on the window, then said, "Don't pretend you don't know I'm watching you." I called Cody and yelled into the phone that the man was at the window. He said he was almost home and told me to call 911, so I hung up and did just that. The man just kept standing there watching me, smiling like this was a game, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I left the living room to the office where there were no windows. A few minutes later, I heard Cody pull into the driveway. Cody ran inside, but when we looked back at the window, the man was gone. The cop who arrived searched but found no footprints or anything. The cop was not very familiar with the process for reporting an AirTag, but he gave me a police report number to use, and he suggested contacting Apple to start the process of tracking the owner. The next day, I tried that, but it turned out it would be a much more involved legal process than I was expecting. When I simply didn't hear or see anything else for a couple of weeks, I just lost interest. Maybe the man saw my brother and cops arrive, so he bailed and didn't come back. But to be honest, I have thought back on this, and on the girl's pictures on his phone. and I hope to God that wasn't another girl who he'd potentially kidnapped or worse. I truly hope that was just a random girl's picture he took off social media or something. This experience changed me for the worse. I'm not the same person I was before it all happened, and I fear I never will be again. My name is Claire. This didn't happen so long ago that I've forgotten about it, but it's not like it happened last week either. I no longer live where this story took place, so that's why I feel comfortable talking about it now. I had just moved to a new city for a promotion at work. It wasn't anything too exciting, just your standard mid-sized city. It was a Tuesday evening when the first strange thing happened. I was driving home from work, which, mind you, is just a short 15-minute commute, and I was listening to a podcast when my phone buzzed. It was a notification I had never seen before. AirTag found moving with you. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone had dropped their keys in the parking lot, or maybe it was just one of my friends playing a prank. But as soon as I opened the notification, I was horrified. The app said the AirTag had been moving with me for over an hour. That meant it had been in my car the entire commute, or worse, in the parking lot before I even got in. I checked the back seat, under the seats, in the glove compartment, and even in the trunk, but there was nothing. No AirTag, and beyond that, there was nothing unfamiliar or out of place either. I instantly knew what was going on. Someone had placed an AirTag in my car, and whoever it was knew where I went. Worse, they knew where I was. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. Unable to find the AirTag, I had no choice but to drive home, meaning I'd be leading a potential stalker directly to my apartment, but I had no other option. Once I got home, I checked my car again, this time more thoroughly. I still couldn't find it though, despite my phone insisting it was there. The logical part of me wanted to call the police, but I hesitated. What could they do? There was no device to show them, and even if there was no direct evidence of who had placed it. I calmed myself down with some reassuring facts. My apartment had decent security, so it wasn't the end of the world if someone knew where I lived, and it wasn't like I could undrive home. Whoever the AirTag belonged to already knew my location, which no police or anyone else could change, so I tried to ignore it. The next morning, I drove to work as usual. The notification popped up again when I got to work, but I ignored it. Despite my efforts, I didn't get much done that day. I couldn't stop thinking about the stupid AirTag. When I got home that evening, I decided I had to find the thing. I spent probably an hour going through my car checking every possible hiding spot, even though I had already checked most of them the day before. Right when I was about to give up again, I ran my hand along the crack where the back seat meets the back and my fingers hit something solid. I already knew what it was. I took the thing inside, trying to ignore how violently my hands were shaking. I ended up just taking the battery out of it because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to destroy it because it could have been used as evidence, but I didn't like the thought of it still being active. The thought that someone had been watching my every move for days, maybe weeks, made me feel exposed in a way that I had never felt before. That night, while I was trying to sleep, I kept thinking about who could have planted that thing in the first place. There were a fair share of guys in my life, ex-boyfriends, friends of friends, flings, but no one who would have done something so messed up. The next evening, I came home late from work after a pretty awful day. I went to unlock my apartment door, something I had done 100 times, and I froze. My apartment door was already wide open. I live alone. No one, not my parents, not any of my friends, should have been inside. I didn't go inside. That would have been a terrible decision. Instead, I went straight back to my car and called the police. They checked the apartment thoroughly. There was no definitive evidence of anyone ever being there. No fingerprints, no forced entry, nothing to indicate someone had actually been inside. I ended up showing them the AirTag notifications and told them everything that had been happening the past few days. The police kept asking me if I had a history of being stalked, or if I knew anyone who would do such a thing, but I didn't. The whole thing was such a nightmare. Things did die down slightly after that. My stalker had probably gotten wind of the police visit, but I ended up moving out anyway. Luckily, I don't think that person followed or tracked me to my new place, but it still gets at me that someone in my life stalked and broke into my apartment. The worst part though, the thing that makes this all so scary, is that I still have no idea how they broke into my apartment in the first place. The door wasn't damaged or broken into. It was simply unlocked with a key that no one else should have had. This happened a few years ago, and I want to remain as anonymous as possible while telling this story for reasons you'll soon understand. I'm from an upper middle class suburb, but that's as much information as I'm comfortable giving. The nightmare I'm about to tell you about took place over several months and led to a slew of legal issues that, at times, made me genuinely question whether my life was going to be ruined. In other words, it wasn't just stressful and scary, but truly overwhelming on a level that's difficult to capture. I don't mean that as a joke or a figure of speech. There were days where I spent hours staring at the ceiling while considering some very dark things. This all started a couple weeks after I broke up with my first serious girlfriend after college. Let's just call her Devin. I'm not going to get into it. I refuse to do that to myself. But let's just say we did not end on good terms. Despite that, I wasn't too beat up about breaking things off. She was psychotic and I was kind of relieved to let it go. I have this friend named Zenon. Weird name, I know, but his parents have always been very wealthy, eccentric, and completely out of touch with reality. He throws parties pretty frequently at this huge property he inherited from them, which is something I still don't really understand since it's not like they passed away or anything. But that's his world, not mine. I was at one of these parties where I ran into one of my ex's friends, who I'll just call Taylor. Seeing her there wasn't the most surprising thing in the world. Most people in our area know Zenon, and basically everyone went to the same high schools and colleges around here. Plus, most of the people who left for college ended up coming back anyway. What was surprising was how aggressively and obviously she was coming on to me. Taylor had always talked shit about me to Devin while we were dating, so I found her behavior extremely strange. But my skepticism didn't last, and I ultimately gave in after a few more beers. And before you jump to call me stupid, if you knew what Taylor looked like, you wouldn't blame me. The two of us ended up hooking up in one of the upstairs bedrooms. I must have been significantly more dazed than she was, because I hadn't even started getting dressed before she was already halfway out the room. As I was leaving the room myself, I realized my wallet was no longer in my pants pocket. Taylor had disappeared at that point, probably to go flirt with some other guy in the crowd, but I tried to find her anyway. After maybe 20 minutes of searching, I gave up. I ran back upstairs to the room we'd been in and searched everywhere, but my wallet was nowhere to be found. My next instinct was to call her, but it took me all of 10 seconds to remember that I was still blocked from when Devin and I had broken up. And since there was no way I'd be unblocking Devin, you couldn't pay me to do that, I had no way of getting in contact with Taylor. Losing my wallet didn't bother me all that much though. It was probably just the alcohol, but I decided to ignore the problem for the rest of the night, enjoy the party, and honestly relish in the fact that I'd gotten one over on my ex by hooking up with her friend. I don't remember much after that. I'm pretty sure one of my buddies ended up driving me home. The second I woke up the next morning, I instantly remembered the AirTag I kept in my wallet for situations exactly like the one from the night before. I pulled up my iPhone and saw that it was active. It was Saturday, meaning I didn't have to work, so I decided to ignore my brutal hangover and track my wallet down. The location was showing up at one of the local gyms, so I figured I'd drive over there and confront Taylor for stealing it, or determine if she had taken it by accident. Or hell, if someone else entirely had found it. As soon as I stepped out of my car and started walking toward the gym entrance, the AirTag went offline, which I found strange, borderline impossible timing. The receptionist at the front desk refused to let me look around without a membership, which frustrated me more than it should have. So instead, I walked the perimeter of the building like some kind of weirdo, looking through the glass to see if I could spot Taylor inside. But I didn't see her anywhere. In fact, I didn't see anyone I recognized at all. Not Devin, not any of my friends, not some random person from Zenon's party, no one. The AirTag was still offline, so I had no choice but to just go home and bury my frustrations in whatever work I needed to get done before Monday. All my cards were already canceled at that point, so I couldn't imagine what use someone would have for an empty wallet. I kept checking its location periodically throughout the rest of the day, but it didn't come back online. Not until the next day around noon, when I saw that it was once again online, this time at some random park nearby. So I again rushed to my car and drove out to its location, determined to get to the bottom of what was going on. But the exact same thing happened. As soon as I exited my car, the AirTag went offline. It was like someone was doing it deliberately to mess with me. There were a handful of people in the park, but again, no one I recognized. I was a bit more desperate this time around, so I actually started jogging around the park a little, but to no avail. As I was getting back to my car, I felt this sick feeling start bubbling up. Like I was being watched. Worse, like I was being observed. How could someone disable an AirTag the moment I showed up? They must have been watching me. It was a really uncomfortable thought, but there was nothing I could do about it. Looking back, that was the first time I suspected something sinister might have been going on. After I got home, I did some research and found out that whoever had my wallet was probably removing and replacing the AirTag battery to take it on and offline. It was infuriating to think that someone, probably Taylor, was toying with me like this. I had work the next day, so it wasn't like I could devote much energy to the situation. But for the next few days, the AirTag stayed offline. I decided to give up on the whole thing, refusing to give Taylor the satisfaction of watching me wander around like a lost puppy. But of course, the moment I started getting on with my life, everything hit the fan again. Only what happened next was about 1,000 times worse. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when the sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. It had been so long, literally years, since I had experienced true terror, but I can only describe it as suffocation. I physically couldn't breathe for about 15 seconds. It felt like someone was choking me. After finally snapping out of my haze, I called 911 and told them what was going on. Then I locked my bedroom door and listened as the person below me started tearing through the place. I wanted to go down there and confront them. I did, I swear. But I didn't have access to a weapon, and I wasn't about to lose my life over some personal belongings. So I waited. But from the sound of it, the intruder was gone long before the police arrived. And they were. The police took my statement, and I gave them a catalog of everything that was missing. My laptop, my monitor, some miscellaneous electronics, and a few other things. You might be wondering why I didn't connect the break-in to the AirTag situation, which is a fair point. And I did think about it, but I ultimately figured that would have been unnecessarily dramatic and paranoid. Fast forward a few weeks. I still checked the location of that AirTag from time to time, just out of curiosity. But every time I did, it was offline. That is, until one random time it wasn't. It was showing up at a decently popular bar that I'd been to a handful of times. Despite having promised myself that I wouldn't be suckered into someone else's game again, I couldn't resist. What happened when I got there really shouldn't surprise you. As soon as I was in spitting distance of the bar, this time with a hoodie on trying to be inconspicuous, the AirTag went offline. But this time I couldn't just swallow my rage and frustration. I actually started going up to random people in the line and accusing them of having taken my wallet. It was bad. I was just approaching people at random, and even though I knew I was causing a scene, I couldn't stop. Everyone was staring at me, and that just made my outburst that much worse. It got so bad to the point where one of the bouncers had to come over and physically kick me off the premises. It was one of the most embarrassing and infuriating moments of my life. I got played just one more time after that, this time at a random coffee shop in the middle of the day, before I swore to never check the AirTag's location again, this time for real. But just over a week later, my life damn near ended. This is where excess detail becomes really risky, but please know that what I said earlier is 100% true. What happened next caused irreparable damage to my mental health and put me in a very dark place. I was getting ready for work one day when there was a knock at my door. It was the police, and they had an arrest warrant with my name on it for suspicion of stalking, along with a search warrant for my house. Specifically, they were looking for a journal that was supposedly hidden in one of my dresser drawers. I had no idea what was going on. I told them there was no journal in my room, but they weren't asking for my permission. That was what the warrant was for. Still, I insisted that there was no journal anywhere in my room, but they found one anyway. I didn't see them find it. I was already in the back of a police car in handcuffs by then. The next few months of my life were an absolute nightmare. Apparently, Devin had been crafting a case against me without my knowledge for over a month. She had produced what seemed like an overwhelming amount of evidence that I'd been stalking her during that entire period of time, even though in reality, I hadn't seen or communicated with her even once. There were pictures of me that she claimed to have taken at the gym, that one park, and the other locations. Locations that I'd been lured to by the AirTag. It was her the whole time. She had text messages that supposedly proved she was at those locations when those photos were taken, even though I knew for a fact that she hadn't been at any of them. But it gets worse. She had a series of text messages that had apparently been sent from my phone to hers over the course of several weeks. Really disturbing, harassing messages. Stuff an actual stalker would say, which is basically what I was at that point. In the messages, Devin would plead and beg quote-unquote me to stop contacting her, saying my actions were damaging her mental state. She's bipolar and takes medication for it, and she was saying that what I was doing was causing her to live in constant fear and anxiety. She even claimed that the stress from my harassment made her crash her car, among some other things I don't want to repeat. No one believed my story. I had no proof of anything, and she had it all. The journal was the most damning piece of evidence. It supposedly contained pages upon pages of me detailing Devin's daily schedule and having these psychotic conversations with myself about all the sick, nasty things I was going to do to her. Reading it made me feel sick, not just because it was so disturbing, but because I didn't write a single bit of it. No lawyer could help me. Her evidence was too overwhelming, and I couldn't prove any of it was fabricated. At one point, I was being advised to plead guilty. Guilty to a slew of crimes I didn't commit and would never think about committing. It was utterly disgusting. It made me feel like a disgusting human being. What ended up saving me was something completely out of my control. This guy Devin was sleeping with, I won't even bother naming him, called the police and confessed his role to the whole scheme. He told them that Devin had given him my AirTag, which she gotten from Taylor after Zenin's party. According to him, Devin had instructed him to lure me to different locations, remove the battery when he spotted me, and take inconspicuous pictures of me from a distance. He agreed to it because he thought it was some kind of funny joke at first, but text messages between him and Devin revealed that he started having second thoughts when she began talking about planting evidence in my house. The texts also showed exactly how she'd done that too. She apparently had made a copy of my house keys without my knowledge while we were still dating. Things went pretty quickly after that. Under pressure to now tell the truth, Devin ended up admitting to everything, including breaking into my house herself. She'd stolen my laptop because she knew my password, another thing I had no idea about, and she planned to use it to send those harassing messages to herself. Her logic was that she could later claim that I'd sent them from my phone and then deleted them, and that my laptop had been stolen so it couldn't be used as evidence against her story. She said breaking in and making it look like a random robbery was safer than constantly sneaking into my house over several weeks to send messages and delete them. Everything was eventually dismissed and justice was served, but I don't think I'll ever recover from what happened. I bet this story is already pretty long, but I could write pages and pages more about it. I haven't even given you the specifics of the aftermath, the way my family and friends alienated me, or even the painful process of keeping my name off the internet. I haven't given you my theories about why my ex would go to those lengths in the first place, or the kinds of stunts she used to pull while we were dating. I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable dating someone again. That's the worst part of it. The idea that someone could manipulate technology and the legal system to effectively destroy my life, and almost get away with it, is something that will forever terrify me. If that guy hadn't developed a conscience, my life might actually have been ruined. When I was newly single after my 2-year relationship ended, I was back to living alone again, and back to swiping on Tinder and all those apps. I had been single for a few months already, and I had met a few people in that time. During that time, I matched a girl on Tinder named Tracy, and she gave me her Snapchat, but it quickly fizzled out to her just watching my stories and not really communicating. That kinda used to happen all the time when I was in college. But now being in my late 20s, using Tinder, and just being reminded of how immature all this online dating stuff is, it feels a lot different at this age. I own a corner townhome in a little community. If you're wondering what I do, I'm an accountant. Good money, but miserably boring. After my ex moved out, I thought I would be ready for the privacy and peace and quiet, but I'd say after the first month, the novelty of that wore off. Maybe I'm more of a relationship person, or I just need people around, but being alone was getting to me. That's why I was constantly swiping on dating apps and trying to go on dates, just to get out of the house. This was last December. I posted something on my Snap story that had to do with Christmas, and guess who commented on my story? It was that Tracy girl who I hadn't spoken to in weeks. She struck up a conversation about us doing some Christmas-themed stuff together, and from there we started chatting for a bit. I suggested the most festive things I could think of: ice skating, going to the village, and looking at the decorations, but she suggested we decorate my Christmas tree. Firstly, I did have a fake tree, but it was up in the attic, so I told her I didn't have it up yet because it's kind of a two-person job getting it out of the attic. She said she'd gladly come over and help, so I figured why not. I told her to come over around 9 that night. It was already dark at that point when we made the plan. It was likely like 7:30 because I remember hurriedly grabbing my keys and rushing to drive to the liquor store to buy a couple bottles of wine. When I got back to the house, I vacuumed and swept the floors. Ever since my breakup, the things my girlfriend would do to clean the place were left to me, and I realized how quickly a place can get dirty. 9 p.m. rolled around, and I was low-key sitting upright on the couch with the TV on, pretending like I was just chilling in the living room watching a movie already. Meanwhile, I had set everything up to be cozy and relaxing. But I sat there for a while, waiting on her to message me or for the doorbell. I sent a follow-up saying, "Let me know when you're on your way," and I eventually started to think she was flaking, until finally, around 9:30, when she said she's outside. She came inside, and I was shocked to find that I was looking up at her. She was a couple inches taller than me. I'm 5'10", so she had to be at least 6 feet tall. I also immediately picked up on the fact that she smelled like she was drenched in perfume. We went straight to the couch and sat down, and she sat really, really close to me, like our legs were touching. This is where I started to get confused in how exactly I was feeling. She looked a bit older, maybe a little rougher, I'm not sure how to explain it. And underneath that overpowering smell of cheap-smelling perfume, I couldn't help but feel like there was a slight hint of body odor, which completely turned me off. I asked her if she wanted wine, and she said yes please. So I went and poured a couple glasses as we talked. Have you ever met someone for the first time that you'd been texting or DMing for a while, and when you finally meet, they just end up being nothing like you pictured in your head? That was pretty much this. Something about her felt off, like she lacked certain social cues. I handed her a glass of Merlot and we cheers each other. I shit you not, she almost immediately spilled a huge drop of red wine on my light blue couch. I composed myself, but I wanted to scream. I said it's okay, as I ran to the kitchen to get a damp paper towel and sponge. I ran back to the couch and blotted it as quickly as I could before it would settle. She kept apologizing, and I kept saying it was okay. After this, it got a little more tense, and to break the tension, I suggested I get the tree out of the attic. So I went up to the attic, slid over the giant box with all the tree parts in it, and started handing her down the pieces one by one, each piece getting bigger until we got to the biggest part, the part that I wouldn't be able to handle going down the ladder on my own. She grabbed it with ease. I had to remember this girl's size. Once everything was handed down, I went back down and we assembled the tree in the living room with Christmas music playing. I poured her more wine and I drank more myself. I loosened up a bit more. Wine makes any situation feel better. Once we had the tree set up, next was the ornaments. I told her my ornaments were all in the crawl space. These ornaments were all from my childhood. My parents gave me bins and bins of Christmas decorations. So I went down to the crawl space and one by one started taking out the bins, while I left Tracy in the living room to relax. As I was doing all of this, I started feeling woozy, like the wine was getting to my head. I've never been a heavy drinker, so I do have a low tolerance, but I felt like I hadn't drank that much to feel this way. I grabbed the first bin and started lugging it up the stairs. By the time I got to the top, Tracy wasn't anywhere in sight. I assumed she was in the bathroom at first and called her name. I looked around each room and then saw that the bathroom was empty. I scratched my head in confusion as I kept calling her name. I went to message her on Snap, but she never opened the Snap. I checked the 2 bedrooms too, but she was gone. I couldn't believe this. She snuck out on me. This was when I started wondering if she thought I was ugly or weird or something, even though truthfully, I wasn't even really into her either. I crashed onto the couch, which suddenly felt a lot more comfortable than before, and honestly, As far as I remember, I periodically checked my phone to see if she opened my Snap and just watched whatever was on TV, until my memory just faded to black. I swear, everything just went black. And then I woke up in darkness. No lights, no TV on. I looked around in the dark room, and I knew I was hearing things. I felt like I was still on the couch, and I felt weak. My limbs were hard to move, but I managed to find my phone right under me within seconds, and I checked the time. The second the phone screen lit up, I saw it. Even though the light was facing toward me, that glow from my phone screen with the brightness all the way up revealed the outline of a tall person's silhouette standing in front of me. For some reason, I didn't scream. I just put the phone down, bringing the room back to darkness. I finally opened my mouth to say, "Tracy," hoping it was her, but still not in that moment remembering what had happened earlier. Whoever was standing there didn't answer me. I eventually picked my phone back up and turned on the flashlight, and I saw that it was in fact Tracy standing in front of me. She wasn't moving, she was just looking down at me. I felt locked to the couch. I don't know if it was because of pure fear or the effects of whatever she had obviously laced me with. I genuinely was having a hard time moving my limbs. I felt weak and helpless. All I could manage to say was "Tracy" a couple more times. She turned towards the stairs, and again, I swear, she sprinted toward them, and all I heard were the disturbingly loud stomps of her running down the stairs. I heard something slam from downstairs. Looking back, I'd imagine it was the front door. Everything looked and sounded so wonky in those minutes after I woke up. Each passing minute, I felt more and more clear-headed, and moving became easier. I checked Snapchat to see that her account was gone, aka she blocked me. I looked out the front window and saw no cars outside besides my own and the neighbors. And then I realized I never saw the vehicle that she arrived in, or if she even arrived in one. I checked my entire home from top to bottom, checking for anything that could have been stolen. The only items I found missing seemed kind of bizarre at first, but honestly made so much sense soon after. Every last bottle of pills from my house was gone. All my vitamins and supplements, my bottles of Adderall, and even the bottle of Oxy that I had prescribed but never fully used after a surgery, those were in the drawer next to my bed. I noticed a bottle of vodka was taken from my mini fridge in my room too, but other than that, I didn't see anything else that could have been stolen. Still, I called the police right then and reported the robbery. I gave the Snapchat username and explained that I never got her number or knew anything really about her identity minus the name that she gave me, which was Tracy Gibson. The police knocked on my neighbor's door since all of our homes are attached, even though it was like 1 a.m. With me standing next to them, they questioned if he'd seen or heard anything strange, to which he said no, he'd been asleep. After about 20 minutes, the police left. I made sure all of my keys were still in place so as to make sure she couldn't get back in, but other than that, this Tracy person disappeared without a trace. I knew her behavior was quirky and wonky from the first few minutes of meeting her, and it makes so much sense now. I won't even call it a theory because I just know this is the truth. I think that girl, or woman I should say, was older than she claimed, and she was potentially homeless with a serious drug addiction. I think she drowned herself in perfume to mask the body odor that was honestly still showing through. She laced my wine with something when I was in the attic clearly. I don't know exactly how long I was out, but it was enough for her to scour my entire home for any and all drugs and supplements. I still remember how disturbing of an image it was seeing her tall silhouette standing in front of me while I was just waking up on the couch. Honestly, after this, I didn't even decorate the tree that year. This happened on Christmas Eve back in '97 when I was 7 years old. Since we're Jewish, we don't celebrate Christmas, so Christmas Eve was just like any other night for us. Our dad is a doctor, and since he's Jewish, he always works on call at the hospital during the Christmas holidays, so he wasn't home tonight. That just left my little sister and I by ourselves for the evening while our dad worked. Technically our mom was home, but to be blunt, she was an alcoholic. Back then, being a 7-year-old, I had no idea what alcoholism was. All I knew was that my mom was always passed out once it got dark and near impossible to wake up. Sorry if it sounds harsh or TMI, but it's relevant to my story. My sister and I were downstairs watching TV when we heard a knock at the door. Being the oldest, I went to see who it was. Our door had glass panes built into it, which made it easy to see who was on the other side. There was a man standing outside in a Santa suit holding a bag, and when he saw me, he smiled and waved at me to come to the door. I went near the door but did not open it, and I thought it was odd that someone dressed like Santa would come to our house out of anyone's house in the neighborhood. He said, "Hey kid, it's me Santa. Let me in, I'll give you your presents." I remember point blank telling him that Santa isn't real, and that if he was, he doesn't give Jews presents anyway. That's when he said, "Of course I'm real. In the past, I only used to visit Christian homes, but lately, I felt bad that Jewish kids never get any presents. So this year, I changed the rules so that you can get presents too." But I didn't buy it, and instead, I remember getting mad at him, arguing that Jews get presents. We just get them during Hanukkah and not on Christmas. The smile fell from his face, and all his jolly charm disappeared as he began demanding I open the door. I told my sister to dial 911, and the guy seemed to run away. We did call the cops. However, unfortunately, the operator didn't understand what we were saying. Looking back, I think she may have thought we were just little kids excited that Santa Claus was coming to our house. Regardless, she didn't take us seriously, and instead just told us that this number was to be used for emergencies only before disconnecting the call. My sister and I now got really scared because we didn't know who else to call. Since we were only 4 and 7, the only numbers we knew how to dial were our home number and 911. And since this is the 90s, my dad didn't have a cell phone yet, and I had no idea what the hospital number was to reach him there. And with our mom impossible for us to wake up, we were essentially on our own. We hoped the man wouldn't come back, but a few minutes later, he was knocking on the door again. He said he knew the cops weren't coming and to go ahead and let him in or we'd be in big trouble. My sister started crying and ran upstairs trying to wake my mom. Not knowing what else to do, I did the one thing that made sense to my 7-year-old brain. I grabbed a bunch of candles we keep for our menorah and lit them all, then ran below where the smoke detector was. I blew out all the candles quickly before tossing them all up to the smoke detector. Thankfully, they gave off enough smoke to set off the smoke alarm. As an adult, I realized how stupid this was, and fortunately, I did not accidentally set the house on fire. But at that time, all I knew was that the smoke alarm would instantly call 911 for me and send help to our home. There was a fire department not even 2 minutes from our house, so they got here pretty fast. My sister came downstairs, scared of the fire alarm, but I told her there was no fire and to not go outside, but instead wait inside with me. To my amazement, the guy still did not leave. Instead, the bastard ran to the firefighters, presumably telling them that he was glad they showed up. I remember that he claimed he was my dad, and that he dressed up like Santa Claus for Christmas Eve to surprise us. He explained that his suit didn't have any pockets to hold his keys, and that with the door locked, he couldn't get the door open to save us from the fire, so he begged the firefighters to break down the door, and surprisingly, the firefighters seemed to believe him. They were actually getting ready to break down the door, and told us to stand back, but we started crying, shouting at them that he's not our dad, that our dad is working at the hospital, and that we have no idea who this guy was, and that we don't even celebrate Christmas. The firefighter who was about to break down the door thankfully stopped and listened to us. He asked, "You don't celebrate Christmas?" I told him no because we're Jewish, and showed him my kippah on my head as well as our menorah. I then broke down crying, explaining how I set off the smoke alarm to try and get help because the police wouldn't believe us, and to please not let the guy in. The firefighter thankfully believed me, and then asked the guy why Santa would show up to a Jewish home. I don't remember exactly what the guy said, but the firefighters clearly didn't believe him. 2 of them wrestled the guy to the ground while the other called the police to come by. They also asked what hospital my dad worked at so they could let him know what was going on. The police arrived and arrested the guy, while another officer stayed with us until my dad came home and explained the situation to him. My dad was furious with our mom for being wasted and essentially sleeping through the whole thing, but mostly he was grateful that we were okay. As far as Christmases go, I was glad to have our usual boring and quiet Christmas the following year. To this day, I think being Jewish saved my sister and I's lives, because had we opened that door to let Santa in, there's a good chance that would have been our final Christmas. It was December 2022. My girlfriend Charlotte and I were driving to the Pocono Mountains. We had rented a super cozy looking Airbnb decked out with Christmas decorations, and it was nicely located with a nice view, big property, and not far from a cute little village. To make things even more festive feeling, there was a snowstorm coming that night, so we set out on the road a little earlier to allow us time to get groceries and everything set up in the Airbnb. From the city to the Poconos was about 4 hours. We made decent time. We stopped at a Family Dollar for some snacks and groceries, and then we went straight to the Airbnb. We turned towards the uphill gravel road through a clearing in the trees that led to the property. The house was surrounded by woods. It had a big deck with a hot tub on it, which was very appealing, especially the idea of sitting in it during a snowstorm. There were a bunch of Christmas decorations on the property, including some light-up reindeer, a big snowman, and big decorative candy canes lining the walkway to the front deck. We had to take a few trips to and from the car to bring everything inside. First impression, the place had a very comfy feeling as we expected from the pictures. It had a Christmas tree in one corner, stockings hung on the walls, and a bunch of smaller decorations scattered about. It had that very welcoming smell of wood that you'd expect in a country log cabin, though it was more so just a regular house. Then I realized why. There was a stack of logs next to a big fireplace in the living room. There were 3 bedrooms, though of course we only needed 1. We put our luggage and such in a second bedroom. I did the usual stuff like inspect the fridge, turn on the TV to see if there's cable or Netflix, and look out all the windows. There was an upstairs, but it was more of a loft with a pool table and a couple of couches. Then there was a basement. For the hell of it, I went down to check out the basement. It was fairly big relative to the size of the house. It felt disconnected from the Airbnb though. It wasn't furnished for hanging out in. It was dark and cold and felt more like a space to do laundry and a workspace. Then there was a knock at the front door. I hurried up to answer it, and there was a guy who looked to be in his late 40s. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a ripped up yellowish brown jacket. He smiled at me and said, "How are you folks doing?" I replied good and asked him if he was the Airbnb host. He replied he runs the place with his brother. I asked for his name, and he said Tom. Tom said he lives just up the road next door if my girl and I need anything. I thanked him, and then he walked away. I found it interesting that he knew I was with my girlfriend. Charlotte didn't come to the door, but maybe his brother told him about us. I did have a conversation with Mike, the host, about it being my girlfriend and I wanting to do something festive. It was pitch black out and it was snowing. We cranked up the heat in the house and started preparing the dinner we bought, which was chicken thighs, broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread. It was pretty grab bag. We ate on the couch with the Christmas tree lights on in the corner, giving the room a nice comfy glow as we watched the Polar Express. It was the only good Christmas movie on any of the streaming platforms. If you can't tell, we really love Christmas. After the movie, and when we felt we had digested enough, we went outside to the deck to hop in the hot tub. I turned on all the decorations and Christmas lights in the front yard, and as we sat in the hot tub watching the snowfall, it felt like bliss, until the bubbles on the hot tub stopped, and it went silent, and we heard unmistakable footsteps from somewhere on the property. Charlotte and I looked at one another. I asked her if I should shout who's there, but she said no. The footsteps moved further and further until they were no longer audible. I told Charlotte it was probably a deer, but deep down, I knew those were the footsteps of a person. After the hot tub, we went to take a shower before bed. The hot water in the shower didn't last for more than maybe 2 minutes though. Something was wrong. When the water turned ice cold, we screamed and jumped out of the shower. I messaged Mike, the host, about it. He responded within half an hour saying that's odd and that he'll have a guy come and look at the hot water heater tomorrow. We went to sleep after our half shower. In the middle of the night though, we awoke to very aggressive bangs on the front door of the house. Charlotte was shaking me, terrified. I said I'm gonna check who it is, but she demanded I stay in the bed and don't make a sound. Honestly, I was glad she said that. No part of me wanted to know who was at the door in the middle of the night. I think there were 3 sets of really loud and angry sounding bangs before they stopped. We sat upright for a few minutes in silence, whispering to each other. I went over to lock the bedroom door for added security, I guess. Minutes dragged along, but ultimately, after about half an hour of sitting wide awake, we eventually drifted back off to sleep. First thing in the morning, I messaged Mike again about the knocks at the door. He answered more quickly this time, seeming pretty confused like us. He basically said how strange that is. He didn't know why anyone would be roaming around late at night like that. He said if anything like that happens again, that we should alert the authorities. Honestly, not the most reassuring response, but I mean, he was right. What else could he tell us? Grab a gun and shoot whoever was at the door? I didn't want to keep complaining to Mike constantly, but I mean, these were some valid concerns I was bringing up to him. There was a lot of snow outside, and it was a dark, cloudy day. There were still some flurries falling onto the ground. I went out to wipe the snow off my Jeep, and while I was doing so, I noticed footsteps in the snow. They looped around the house. I remembered the knocks from the night before, and wondered if it was from the same person. But these footprints looked fresh, and it snowed all night. Surely the footprints from last night would have filled in by now. I heard footsteps approaching now, actually, and I saw Tom walking from around my car. I told him about the hot water heater problem, and that Mike said they were sending someone to take a look at it. He said he knew and that he was here to take a look at it, actually. I also told him about the knocks at the door last night and the footprints in the snow. I even showed him. He looked at them and said there's a lot of strange folk out here that go snooping around at night. I asked if we should refrain from using the hot tub at night then, and he said no, that shouldn't be a problem. The people around here are harmless. He went inside into the house and walked around for a bit before walking down to the basement. He told me he'll have a look at the hot water heater. Tom seems like a weird dude, honestly. I messaged Mike saying Tom's here now checking out the water heater. Mike replied back asking, is Tom the name of the plumber? And I replied, no, your brother. He replied, what do you mean? He said he's my brother? It started to click in my head. I responded, do you have a brother named Tom who runs this Airbnb with you? And he replied, no, who is this person? I hurried to Charlotte and told her to collect her things quietly. We need to get out of here. As quickly as we could, we packed our bags, grabbed all of our stuff, and brought it outside to the car in one trip. I'm sure we left behind a charger or something small, but who cares? We got in my car, and when I started it, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Tom quickly approaching the rear of the Jeep. I put it in drive and drove out of there as quickly as I could. When we were back on the road, we called Mike and explained everything and told him he needs to call the police now. He didn't stay on the line with us for long, but 20 minutes later, he called us back. We were in the car still. He said the police were there now and didn't see anyone in the house. Mike was on his way to the house as well, but he was mostly calling to get more details from us. We drove around the area and explored just as a way to calm our nerves after what just happened. After a few hours, we drove home. Mike messaged me later that night updating me and apologizing for everything. He said he didn't know anyone who resembled my description of Tom. What disturbs me is that man was watching us the entire time, from the moment we arrived to when we were in the hot tub, and he was probably the one banging on the front door in the middle of the night. Who knows what his intentions were? It's a good thing we left when we did, though. I'm the middle sibling of 3. I have 2 brothers. They both grew up as scouts. My older brother made it to Eagle Scout. My little brother quit some time in Boy Scouts. But for whatever reason, my parents never forced me to become a scout when I was a kid. Which is weird, because I remember always being really jealous of my older brother Scott when my mom would bring me along to the Pinewood Derby contests and celebrations and such. But the thing that I was always the most jealous that I missed out on were the campouts. When the troops would go out into the wilderness and camp out for a whole weekend. I went along for the drive once or twice, and I saw them all setting up, doing campfires and such, but being younger and also not part of the troop, I don't think I was allowed to stay, so I'd go home with my parents. My jealousy of these campouts was mainly towards my older brother because I was growing up watching him prepare for these camping trips. Before every trip, he'd be given a tent to take home and practice setting up in the backyard. Even though I was only like 7 or 8, I remember so clearly how eager I was when I hatched the idea to do a little backyard camping. Basically, we set up the tent in the backyard and sleep in it overnight. To my little mind, that was the most exciting idea ever. Also, our backyard wasn't really a traditional backyard. Our childhood house was in a very spacious neighborhood where yards just kind of all meshed together and there weren't many fences, more so large patches of trees and brush separating yards, which added to the camping feel. Our backyard was also huge, and we had a fire pit, so our parents played along and set up the fire pit in our backyard for us so we could get the full camping experience. My little brother roasted marshmallows with us too, but our parents weren't going to let him sleep in the tent. He was only like 4 at the time, and it wasn't a good idea. And no, he wasn't a scout yet, obviously. He was 4. After it got a little late, our parents brought him in and told us it was time to start getting ready for sleep. At this time in my life, the Game Boy SP was the handheld console. So after getting into our sleeping bags, Scott and I whipped out our Game Boys and played our respective games. I was playing Super Mario Bros. 2, a game I was obsessed with yet could never beat as a child. After getting a little more tired though, I turned to my side and tried to sleep. But I remember not being able to sleep. Like, I was tired, but restless. Maybe because I'd never slept in a sleeping bag before, and quite frankly, it wasn't comfortable. A lot of time passed, and I mean a lot, before I finally nodded off. And then, I woke up probably confused about where I was at first, not recognizing my surroundings. I remember looking around the dark tent, and then noticing something. Scott was gone. His sleeping bag was empty. The tent zipper was closed though. He must have went inside because he couldn't sleep. I was suddenly too scared to be in the tent alone, so I got up and unzipped the tent. But before crawling out, I did a little innocent peek outside simply because I was too scared to run out through the backyard without checking if the coast was clear. But it was not. I saw someone sitting by the fire pit in the darkness. It wasn't Scott. It was a grown man. He was facing the tent, and surely he had to have seen me. I gasped and zipped the tent back up and crawled back into my sleeping bag as if that piece of cloth was any form of protection. I stayed completely still inside my sleeping bag. The tent was almost completely dark, just a faint gray from the moonlight coming through the fabric. I don't know what was going through my mind at that point, but I do know that I wanted to call out Dad, just hoping that it was my dad. But I knew it wasn't. I got a look at the man, even just briefly. And if it were my dad, he'd have acknowledged me poking my head out of the tent. And that's when I heard the chair by the fire pit shift. I was shitting bricks, hoping the man didn't get up, and if he did, that he wasn't coming towards the tent. But I could see a shadow now on the other side of the tent blocking some of the moonlight. He was right outside. Somehow, I thought if I didn't move, maybe he would think the tent was empty. Then I heard the zipper, very slowly dragging downward. It only moved a few inches. The opening was small, but it was enough. I couldn't help it. I turned my head just slightly. There's a small gap at the bottom of most tents where the zipper doesn't fully seal. I had never noticed it before that night. An eye was pressed against that gap. Just one eye, looking directly at me. I could see the white of it in the dark. I couldn't even scream at first. Not for a few seconds at least, because I was paralyzed. Then the eye squinted a bit, as if the person was smiling a smile that I couldn't see. The zipper moved another inch, and that's when I finally screamed. I scrambled backwards, kicking out of my sleeping bag, knocking into the tent poles. I heard footsteps immediately take off through the yard. Our back porch light flipped on, which I could see through the tent fabric. My dad burst out the back door yelling. I could hear him running across the grass. By the time he reached the fire pit area, whoever it was already gone. My parents called the police, of course. I don't remember what happened after my parents talked to the cops. I know I went to my parents' room with my mom, and eventually the police did their thing, likely searching the immediate area. It was an absolute nightmare. I slept in my parents' bed that night. I was emotionally scarred for a while. Just as things might have been going back to normal, I think it was a few weeks to a month later. This part is what really hammers the nail in the coffin for this experience being something I can never forget. I went to Catholic school, and during lunch we'd have a short recess in the schoolyard, which was all concrete. The far end of the schoolyard was fenced off and looked towards the street. We were playing some game, maybe red light, green light or something. This part I genuinely don't remember. All I know is I had to run to the fence to be considered safe from whatever the threat in the game was. And while I was on the fence, next to some other kids mind you, a man says hey from the other side of the fence. I turn, and it's a man asking me for directions to some place I don't even remember. I said I don't know. We weren't even supposed to talk to strangers outside of the schoolyard. Then he said, "Your name's Chris, right?" And that moment is implanted in my brain. His voice, the look on his face, and my heart dropping. I said no, lying to him. He then smiled and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And at this point, I ran towards one of the recess chaperones and pointed over at the fence, but the man was gone. One of the kids next to me told me he saw the man too. The recess ladies called the recess in short, and the school called my parents. I was sure it was that man from the backyard. I was taken home early that day. I know my parents were so sick and worried after this. It was a hellish month. We lived in such a nice area too, and to almost be chased out of the neighborhood because of this was just a nightmare. After months of me being under tight supervision from my parents, things went back to normal. I can't express enough, though, how much it still pains me in my chest thinking about how I could be dead today if that man had somehow successfully taken me, and it makes me sick wondering if he was ever successful in whatever he was trying to do with someone else. I grew up in Salem, Oregon, a quaint little small town feeling place. I moved out when I was 21, buying my first house about 50 miles out from Salem. I furnished my first house with a mix of stuff for my parents, their friends, and a bunch of stuff off online marketplaces and apps. I was driving a Ford Raptor at the time, so lugging stuff around was thankfully very easy. On Facebook Marketplace one day, I found a listing selling a bunch of good-looking stuff. The ones in the listing that caught my eye were this cream-colored sectional couch that looked pristine, and this Cannondale brand mountain bike. I didn't have a bike at the time, and where my house is, having one is perfect for exercise. The other stuff on the listing didn't really interest me. The listing itself was just sort of a digital yard sale. I contacted the seller, and we did a little typical back and forth. He was pretty short and straight to the point with his answers, and surprisingly easy to negotiate. He agreed to a slightly lower price, and he said I could come pick the stuff up later that night. Days are long in Oregon in the summer, so I'd still be showing up with some sunlight. I banked on having to do a couple trips to transport the sectional couch due to its size. I set out on my way to the house. The address was right on the coast. I checked the satellite view on the map just to confirm it was bringing me to a house, and it was. Based on the map, there was a long trail or driveway that veered off the road towards a huge open property with a big-looking house, and then in the backyard was a literal drop-off to the ocean. All I could think was, no wonder these people were selling all this stuff for so cheap. With that kind of money, I wondered why they weren't just giving it away. I headed out that way, and it didn't take long to get there. I could tell the closer I got to the shore, the nicer the properties got. And then I turned onto the last road before I'd be turning onto the driveway for the house. This road was long. It was lined with woods on each side, and then I'd pass the occasional driveway leading to probably a cliffside mansion. Eventually, I made it to the turnoff. It was a tree-lined dirt road, or the driveway I guess you would call it. About 10 seconds in of driving down this driveway, it opened to this massive clearing. The driveway went on a slight incline leading to the house at the top of this hill. I pulled up next to this older sedan. It was like a Mercury Sable or something. It did not match the house at all. Like this house looked like it belonged to a millionaire, and this car was a piece of shit. I went up to the front door ready to ring the bell, but there was a yellow post-it note on the front door, and it said on it, "Doorbell broken, please use back door." Weird, because I could have just knocked, but I obeyed. As I walked down the front porch, I messaged the guy on Messenger that I arrived and was going around back. I walked around the side of the house, looking at each window as I passed, but the blinds all seemed to be closed. I got to the backyard, and it was crazy. It actually overlooked the Pacific Ocean. I walked up the back deck to go knock on the back door. It was a sliding glass door, but there was some kind of sliding blind that was closed, so I couldn't see inside. I knocked on the glass. I stood there for a minute, then knocked again. I looked down at my phone to see if he answered or read my message. Neither. I went to go sit on one of the chairs on the deck and spun it around to stare at the sunset and the view of the Pacific. It was a surreal view. I kept checking my Messenger app and following up with the guy, but he wasn't answering. I triple-checked that I had the right address, and I did. Plus, the note on the front door confirmed that. I decided if he was in the shower or occupied or something, I'd at least go walk over to the cliffside and get a picture of the view. I did just that. I walked down the deck, then down the seemingly freshly cut grass to the cliffside. Taking in the view, I daydreamed about one day being able to afford a place like this. I started walking back up to the house, but stopped maybe 3 steps in when I realized every single window now had their blinds open, and there was a person standing at each window, standing as still as statues. I didn't know if what I was looking at was some kind of prank or not. I walked a little closer, and the moment I said, "Nope, I've seen enough," was when I realized every single face was smiling. I honestly couldn't tell if they were mannequins or not. That's how still they were. I decided I just needed to get to the car. I did a light jog around the side of the house again, and that side window that I mentioned that also had its blind shut before was now too lifted, and there was someone at this window as well. I didn't know what was going on here, but I had to get out. As I got to the front, I got back in my car, and I didn't even look at the front windows. I didn't even want to know if there were people at these windows too. I reversed all the way down the driveway, and regrettably, I did at one point take a curious look ahead at the house. The front door was open, and there was a person standing on the front porch with his hands in his pockets, watching me drive away. It didn't matter. Everything about this was a red flag. I was out of there in a minute and down the road. The guy never opened or responded to my message still. I decided to turn into the closest neighbor's house driveway and knock on the door. They answered, and I explained the bizarre and disturbing situation I just encountered, and I pressed them about any info on their neighbor. The man who answered, who I'll call Tom, was shocked, because he's close friends with the guy next door, and he said he's hardly ever in town, and that he wouldn't set up some kind of elaborate prank like that. He called his neighbor on the spot, and the guy picked up. Basically, the conversation went as follows from what I remember. "Hey Jim, it's Tom next door. Listen, I got someone at my front door right now saying you invited him to your house to buy stuff, but you pulled some kind of scary prank on him with the windows and stuff." And there was a pause before the Tom guy said, "What are you talking about?" From here, I stepped in and explained everything from the Facebook ad to my arrival there to the people at the windows. He now sounded very concerned because he said he wasn't home this week. I did my best to describe every detail, including what the man on the front porch looked like, as well as the sketchy car. He asked me to take his number so he could contact me after the police investigated. After that, I left. I went home. I really didn't have it in me to commit 2 hours to some police investigation that didn't concern me, truth be told. But I did hear from the guy later that night. He called me and asked me to send him the Facebook listing, but it was removed. I did send him the details of the profile that I was messaging on the Messenger app, but it was now a blank profile. He thanked me for that and would give it to the police anyway. When I asked him what the cops found, he told me they found nothing stolen as far as he knew at that time, and that all the blinds were once again closed, and there was no sedan in the driveway, but that all 3 doors in the house were unlocked. Now the scary part for me is the way they were all standing at the windows, smiling, trying to scare me. And I have to wonder, what use was I going to be of to them? And why did they want me in the backyard? Scary thoughts, honestly. I'm just glad I left when I did. I live with my parents in Murraysville, Pennsylvania. My parents were gone one weekend, so I decided I was going to have a bunch of people over in the backyard for a mini pool party. We have a pool house and an in-ground pool back there. It's perfect for parties, even though I rarely get a chance to throw anything. The rest of the backyard is a little bit of grass and then the woods behind the pool house. It's a very private backyard. Usually. You'll see what I mean soon. So the little party I planned was for Saturday night. Earlier that day, I was setting up outside. It was a little cloudy out, but since it was going to be a night party, that didn't really matter. The woods behind the pool house are pretty big. They go at least half a mile back before they reach another backyard. So there should really be no one walking through them. It's also our property. There are no trails or any reason for anyone to be back there. I was bringing out folding tables for beer pong and refreshments and setting them up when I heard a cough come from the woods. It was clearly a slow, throat-clearing kind of cough, like someone trying to get something out of their throat, and it was definitely a man. I froze with the table still in my hands. I just stood there listening. The wind was barely moving the leaves, so the sound carried really clearly. It came from just inside the tree line, not deep in the woods. Close enough that whoever made it could definitely see me. I slowly set the table down and looked out toward the trees. Confused is one word to use, but unsettled would be a better one. No one should be in those woods, ever. I scanned the tree line and called out, "Who is that?" There was no answer. Not even any movement. No footsteps or branches snapping or anything. That almost made it worse. If it was some random guy walking through, I should have heard him moving away. But it was just quiet. I got that feeling in my chest, like I was being watched. Like someone was standing perfectly still just behind a tree, staring at me. I stood there for maybe 20 seconds just listening. The longer I stood there, the more uncomfortable I felt. Eventually, I just grabbed the rest of the stuff and brought it back inside for a bit. I didn't want to just stand out there alone anymore. I called my good friend Mark to come over early and help me set up. I decided not to mention the cough. I didn't want to sound paranoid before the party even started. Mark came over around 6 p.m. He brought some drinks and helped me finish setting up. I kept glancing at the woods while we were out there, but everything looked normal. Nothing moved. If someone had been there earlier, they were gone. The rest of my friends started showing up around 7 to 8. At the peak of the party, there were at least 20 people. Nothing insane, but it was a good time. There was music playing, people in the pool, lights around the patio on. With that many people there, the woods didn't feel creepy anymore. A couple times during the night, I caught myself looking toward the tree line though. I don't even know why. I guess that cough just stuck with me. Things started dying down around midnight, and by 1 a.m. the last of the guests had left. I figured I would leave the mess to clean up for tomorrow. I was tired and ready for bed. Before going inside, I did one last slow sweep of the backyard. I walked around the pool, checked behind the pool house, looked toward the woods again. Everything seemed normal. The water in the pool was still, the lights reflected off of it. No one was out there. I locked the back sliding door and went upstairs to brush my teeth and go to bed. I was in bed scrolling on my phone for maybe half an hour before putting it down. It probably took another half hour of laying there trying to sleep when I heard a splash. Not a small one, not like something falling in. It sounded exactly like someone jumping into the deep end. My eyes opened immediately. I held still, listening. A few seconds later, I heard the sound of someone swimming, literal strokes through the water. My first thought was maybe someone from the party stayed behind as a joke, or they just woke up drunkenly. But I knew everyone who came. No one would do something like that. I checked my phone, and it was 2 a.m. I got out of bed and walked slowly to the window that overlooks the backyard. I didn't turn on any lights in my room. I didn't want whoever was out there to see me before I saw them. When I looked down at the pool, I saw there was a guy swimming calmly from one end to the other. At first, I tried to recognize him. I knew all 20 or so people who came over. This wasn't any of them. I leaned closer to the glass. The pool lights lit up his face just enough for me to know for sure. I had never seen him before. I yelled out the window, "Who is that?" The swimming stopped immediately. He looked up slowly toward my window. Even from that distance, I could tell he wasn't confused or startled. He just stared up at me. Then he started moving toward the shallow end. He climbed out of the pool, and that's when I saw how tall he was. He stood there dripping wet for maybe 2 seconds, just looking toward the house. I expected him to run away. Instead, he started walking toward the sliding door. Not running or hesitating, just walking fast and direct, like he already knew where he was going, almost in a march. I yelled again, "Hey, who is that?" He didn't respond. I heard the sliding door downstairs open. I know I locked it, I'm positive I did, but I heard it slide open. Then it slid shut. I ran to my bedroom door and locked it. That's when I noticed how much my hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone and texted Mark, asking him if he noticed anyone stay behind before leaving, but I didn't wait for a response. I immediately called 911. I whispered into the phone that there was an intruder in my house. I gave my address as quietly as I could. Then I heard the footsteps. They were slow, wet footsteps on hard wood. I could hear the slight stick of his feet lifting off the floor. He wasn't rushing, nor was he searching randomly. He was walking directly toward the stairs. Each step on the stairs creaked, one at a time. He reached the top. The hallway floor outside my room creaked. He stopped right outside my bedroom door. I could hear water dripping onto the floor. Then the handle moved. He tried opening it once, then twice, then a third time, harder each time. When he realized it was locked, there was a long pause. The 911 operator was saying something, but I had the phone set down. I could barely focus on what she was saying. Then the guy knocked on the door, 3 slow knocks. I picked up the phone and put it on speaker. My voice was shaking, but I said loudly that I was on the phone with the police and they were on their way. There was another long pause. Then a man's voice from the other side of the door said, very low and calm, "It's me, open the door." He sounded like a grown man in his 30s. I said, "I know that I don't know you. Leave now." There was silence again. 5 seconds, maybe more. Then I heard him turn and walk away quickly. I heard his wet footsteps go back down the hallway, then down the stairs, and a few seconds later, I heard the front door downstairs open and slam shut. I didn't move until the police arrived. When I finally went downstairs with them, there was a clear trail of water leading from the back door, up the stairs, all the way to the bedroom door. After searching the entire house, that was the only proof that he had ever been there. I texted everyone I invited, asking if they stayed behind or noticed anyone else stay behind. Anyone who was still awake said no. The rest texted back in the morning saying no. It was a complete stranger, and I have a feeling that cough I heard in the woods earlier that day was that man. I don't know how he got the door unlocked. Maybe he slipped in during the party when people were going in and out. As for a motive, I have no idea. I just know that if I didn't wake up when I did, or if I opened that bedroom door, I don't know what he would have done.
It was Halloween night of 2007, freshman year in high school, and I was with my friends Ivan, Ryan, and Jesse. We were all dressed as the Super Mario characters. I was Luigi since I was the second tallest. Ivan was Mario since he's short and buff. Not that Mario is buff. Jesse was Waluigi because he's freakishly tall and skinny, and Ryan was Wario because he's just really fat. So they were the perfect group costumes for us. We live in a very non-congested suburban neighborhood with a decent amount of space in between houses. On Halloween, that's the worst thing ever. Less bang for your buck. We were trick-or-treating for hours, way past dark, and eventually came the time when most trick-or-treaters were heading home. My feet started to hurt, and I had to constantly switch arms for holding the now 10-pound pillow sack of candy, but we planned on going until our bags were completely full. A lot of the houses by now weren't answering anymore. It was probably past their cutoff time for giving candy to trick-or-treaters. Approaching our next house, we saw a purple bucket on the stoop, which was the best feeling ever. I was the one to get close enough to realize it was empty, which was the worst feeling ever. I turned around when I heard a knock at the window of the house. We all looked at the window. Couldn't see anyone, but heard someone call out, "Wait." The door opened and an older man, late 40s, already balding, stepped outside. He told us to come inside so he can get us some more candy. I said we could just wait out here. He responded saying something along the lines of, "Nonsense, come on in, we'll get you your candy." Ivan stepped in and said, "It's alright. Come on, Dan, let's go." I told the guy to take care and apologized. He just stood there watching as we walked off, not saying anything. I felt bad, but at the same time, that guy seemed like a creeper, and I figured I just dodged a bullet not going in there. If the story ended there, it wouldn't be scary, so of course, it didn't end there. We skipped a few of the guy's neighboring houses just to get further away and continued on with our business. We were walking down close to the nature preserve now, so there weren't many houses around us. At this point, we were now walking back closer to Jesse's house. I noticed Ryan had stopped walking, and I turned around to see what's up. He said he heard someone moving from behind the trees in the preserve. Now this was before everyone's phones had flashlights, so we couldn't just go searching in the woods for someone. Besides, we were just telling Ryan that it must have been a raccoon or something. You may think this is a bit of a cliche, but when things like this happen in real life, you always assume the more logical possibility. It's just natural. Why would we assume we were being followed? I had to put my arm around Ryan's shoulder and nudge him forward. A little ways down the street, me and Ivan picked up on the sound as well. When we all stopped, the sounds of the footsteps from beyond the trees stopped as well. Ivan yelled at the obvious stalker to go away, or we would beat the shit out of them. I knew he was just bluffing though. I could hear the nervousness in his voice. The snap of a twig from beyond the trees triggered a fight-or-flight response in all of us. Me, Jesse, and Ryan all ran for it. Ivan was at first charging to attack, but he quickly followed after realizing we had all taken off. We ran down the dark street, and we all noticed the sounds of at least 2 or 3 pairs of footsteps crushing the twigs and leaves in the woods. We banked it hard right down Jesse Street when it finally came up, and ran straight for his backyard, entering his house through the back door. The first thing we did was peek out through his living room window. We couldn't see anyone. We all had to gather our thoughts and discuss what the hell just went down in his living room, when all of a sudden we heard Jesse's backyard gate slam shut. Jesse dove to turn off the lights. There was a click and a bang from down in the den. It was more than likely Jesse's back door. We all agreed to go down armed with knives and face them. Jesse turned on his back door light, but there was nobody out there. Just then the front door opened, and we all screamed like animals. Jesse's mom and sisters came rushing downstairs. They had just gotten home from their friend's little house party. We all rested assured knowing it was just them. Jesse explained what happened, but made it seem a lot less dramatic. Me and Ivan went home after that and called it a night. At 12:30 a.m., I got a disturbing text message. It was from Jesse. It said, "It wasn't my mom." I texted back saying, "What?" He responded back quickly, saying, "It wasn't my mom in the backyard." My fingers slammed the buttons on my phone, responding back, "What do you mean?" There was a long pause before he finally told me that his mom and sisters said they never went in the backyard. I told him to immediately check the backyard from his upper deck. He had already done just that. He also told his mom everything, and she had already called the police. They didn't find anyone back there, but Jesse did mention the guy who invited us in while trick-or-treating. Nothing ever became of that, and nothing ever happened at Jesse's house again after that one Halloween night. Last Halloween, I was asked to chaperone my little brother Kevin, my little cousin Mike, and his friends while they trick-or-treated. No, I wasn't the typical cliched teenager that was pissed off because I had better things to do. I was perfectly content with hanging out with my little brother, my little cousin, and his friends. I was 18 years old, so I was a bit old to actually be collecting candy myself, so I asked my little brother to carry a smaller bag and put some candy in there for me at each house. By the time that small plastic bag was full, I was asking the kids if they were ready to go home, and every time I would ask, they would say no. They insisted on filling their bags to the top, but that was out of the question. I had enough, so I started leading them back in the direction of Mike's house. Suddenly, a white van pulled up next to us. The driver rolled down the passenger side window and asked me if I could help him out with something. "Nah, I gotta get these kids home," I said, as I directed my attention back to the group. He said he just needed me to fix his passenger seat into the upright position, as it was a 2-person job and he said he had a date. I told him it would have to be quick. He parked his car and told me to get inside. I opened the door and began fidgeting with the seat. He was telling me to lift, and then I would lift. He would then say put it back down. I'm gonna be honest, I thought this guy was just flat out dumb, until I heard the kids screaming outside. There was somebody trying to grab one of Kevin's friends. I almost fell on my face as I tried to get out of the van. When I did, I grabbed him by the throat and began to strangle him. The driver came out and shoved me to the floor and attempted to grab Kevin, but the owner of the house we were in front of came out front with a rifle in his hand. He fired a shot in the air, a warning shot, and with that, the two creeps hopped back in their van and drove off. I tried to grab a hold of one of them, but I wasn't quick enough. The van was gone down the street before I could even take 5 steps after getting up. I couldn't express enough gratitude to that old man who came out with the rifle. I wish I could say the story ended there, happily, but unfortunately the next day while watching the news, there was a report of a missing 9-year-old boy in our town. Now, I usually believe in coincidences, but I know that wasn't any coincidence. And I know for the rest of my life, it will kill me remembering how I could have prevented a kidnapping had I just grabbed a hold of one of those guys. Me, my best friend Jordan, and my friend Chris were trick-or-treating on Halloween night. We live in a really rural side of Pennsylvania, and Halloween always kind of sucked because of that. For all you city and urban kids, Halloween is a lot different when you live in a quiet, rural area. First of all, and most obviously, the walking distance between houses is much worse. However, people tend to give more candy to us since they get less trick-or-treaters. And that's the second thing, less trick-or-treaters. It's actually kind of rare to see other people trick-or-treating by us, mainly because we live in the middle of East Bumblefuck. So it didn't feel as festive or just Halloweenish. I'll tell you right now, it felt a lot spookier though, walking down foresty roads all alone with your group, only with the occasional house. And for that, maybe it was a perfect place for Halloween. It was our first house of the night. I remember the kind old man who answered had a huge bowl of Kit Kats and Snickers. He poured at least a pound of candy into each of our bags. It was great. Our next house was quite some hike away, but once again, the woman who answered was very friendly and gave a very generous amount of candy. After about 6 houses, our bags were starting to get heavy, but you have to realize it took almost half an hour to hit those 6 houses. We reached the entrance of the dirt road leading to smaller houses and trailer homes. The first 2 houses on this dirt road we tried didn't answer, so we decided to try one more on this road before turning around to find another area. We reached the very appropriately eerie property of a smaller house along the dirt path. The whole front yard had an orange glow because of the 4 torches that were lit up leading to the front porch. There was an orange bowl on the stoop decorated with black silhouettes of witches, pumpkins, and other Halloween themes. Besides 2 stray Tootsie Rolls, the bowl was empty. There was a sign on the door that read, "If there is no more candy, enter the back at your own risk for more." Under that there was an evil-looking smiley face, along with an arrow pointing to the backyard. Chris said let's just turn around and go back, but Jordan and I wanted to go around back. It seemed interesting, as if they had something cool set up. Chris had no choice but to follow us around the house to the backyard, which was a small clearing from the miles of forest that surrounded. The backyard was lit up orange as well, but not as brightly. There was a single torch that sat in the middle of the small yard. It provided enough orange light to see a note on the back door. We got closer to the back door and read the note. It was some kind of riddle. It said, "If candy is what you desire, then you have to look closer to the fire." And yes, I still remember that stupid riddle to this day. So of course we assumed that by the fire meant by the torch. Chris was saying he did not like this, that it seemed too suspicious. I was kind of weirded out a bit too, but Jordan seemed interested in it, and I didn't want to seem scared to him. Plus, it was the most interesting thing to happen all night in this boring town. There was nothing around the torch though. It was literally just dug into the center of the backyard. There was a small wooden shed by the corner of the clearing, and in the other corner were a bunch of tools and wood scattered across the grass. Jordan tried leading us closer to the woods, but I was with Chris now. I was pushing for Jordan to just leave now, as it was too weird and creepy to be looking for candy in a stranger's backyard. He kept telling me, hang on, 1 more minute." While he was looking around, I started to examine the place. The house had an old, dirty look to it, Surely a very low-income home. I started to examine the windows. One of them was cracked, the other had blinds closed, and then I looked up at the upstairs window. There was somebody looking down at us, specifically at me. When he or she noticed me, they moved away from the window and shut the blinds. I told Jordan we should go. I looked over to the window of the wooden shed. I could see someone poking their head out ever so slightly. I grabbed Jordan, yanking him over to follow me, but he was frozen still. He was looking up at the woods. I looked to see what he saw. There was a person coming out from the woods. Jordan was laughing. I guess he thought it was supposed to be a part of this spooky setup. I watched with him until we saw the person come into light, wearing a genuinely horrific mask. And there was something in his hand. A machete. Jordan still thought it was a joke. Even Chris seemed to be laughing a bit. Hell, I started to think it was all just a nice little Halloween setup. Until the person wearing the mask charged at Jordan and swung the machete, only he missed as Jordan backed up in time. We all sprinted back out front where we saw somebody blowing out the torches. He spotted us and started chasing us. We ran all the way down the dirt road, back down the paved road, and made it back to my house. Jordan was throwing up. I'm not sure if it was because of running so much, or because of the fact that he almost lost his life. We told my parents right away. My dad called the police and asked them to come to the house. My dad then drove us to the house where it happened with the police following us. By the time we got there, everything was gone. And by everything, I mean the notes, the torches, and the candy bucket. The house had been vacant for months. Nobody was living there. It was the perfect place to set up a murder scene. We requested the police go inside to check, as I did spot somebody spying on us from upstairs. But it turned out they were gone as well. We did the best we could to describe what happened and the people I saw. I believe one of the officers told my dad they would investigate further into this and thanked us for the info. Maybe you don't realize how sick this world is, full of insane, scary, messed up people, until you actually come into encounter with them.
With all this quarantining madness going on because of COVID-19, my family and I have fled New York State to our Massachusetts lake house to avoid contact with other people. The lake, which I will not name for safety reasons, has a bunch of houses surrounding it, and in the summer months it's full of boats and people barbecuing and drinking. But right now, in late March when I'm writing this, it's kind of a ghost town here, and it's weird seeing it like this here. Anyway, I wouldn't be here writing this if something didn't go wrong, right? My younger brothers, who I'll call Steve and Glenn, were out on the deck overlooking the lake with me. We were setting up the table for a game of beer pong, which we invited our dad to play with us so the teams would be even. The sky had reached that point after sunset where most of the sky was dark, but there was still that hint of orange on the horizon. The lake was calm and quiet, not a single boat, and all the neighboring houses seemed to be vacant. We're truly the only ones around still. Our deck has a fire pit, so we lit that for extra light as well as heat because it was chilly. The four of us were playing a game of beer pong, when in the middle of it, Glenn grabbed his phone and lowered the music to his portable speaker. He and Steve turned around to look over the deck to the grass below. My dad and I went over to see what they were looking at. Glenn said he heard something below us, and he could see someone walk under the deck. The deck doesn't have a stairway leading down. You have to go inside and downstairs to get down there. So my dad and I went downstairs and out the back door under the deck. There was nobody there. My dad called out a bunch of times to confirm this, and we went back upstairs. The thing is, Steve swore by it as well that he also heard someone speaking from under the deck. Regardless, we cut the game of beer pong short and went inside, making sure to lock the door. My mom and dad were up in their loft bedroom, while I was in the living room playing PlayStation. That's when it started. Loud, aggressive bangs on the sliding door. Accompanied with the bangs was a man's shrieks and screams. Sounded like he was screaming for help. The curtain to the door was shut, so I couldn't see who it was, but apparently everyone in the house heard it, because my brothers and parents came rushing to the living room. My dad yanked the curtain open to find himself face to face with some red-in-the-face man banging his fist on the glass, begging to be let in. He was claiming he was hurt and needed help. My dad asked, "Where are you hurt?" He didn't answer that though. He just kept repeating, "Let me in, I'm hurt." My dad then yelled to get out of here before we'd call the cops. He yanked the blinds shut and told us all to shut and lock our windows if they were open. We all stayed in the living room together for a couple hours, just to be safe. We had a movie on in the background as we talked, but eventually, with no other uninvited visitors outside, we all split off into our respective rooms for the night. I was browsing YouTube videos in my bed when it happened. The crash of shattering glass so loud it made me jump out of my bed. My heart instantly started racing. I didn't know if I was the only one who heard it because I didn't hear my parents or brothers running out of their rooms. I picked up the phone and called my dad's cell. He picked up and whispered he heard it too, and to stay in my room and lock the door. I reminded him my door didn't have a lock. Of course, my room, while the biggest of my brothers, was the one room that didn't have a lock. He told me to hide in the closet and call my brothers while he called the cops. I heard footsteps outside my room in the living room area. I tiptoed to my closet and did my best to quietly open and close the door, but the damn hinges just had to squeak. I sat behind a big plastic bag and texted my brothers, who also heard the noise and each locked their doors. It was the most tense moment of my life in that closet. The bedroom door opened, and I could see through the strips in the closet door someone walk to my bed and sit at the edge of it. He then took off one of his shoes and started shaking it, as if to get something out of his shoe. He put his shoe back on, then his head actually turned to look at the closet door. I felt as though he was looking at me. There was just this silence for the longest time, until he finally spoke, saying, "I know you're in there. I'm sure your family already called the cops. I'm not sure what my next course of action should be." At that moment, I had to decide whether to stay in there or make a break for the door, and I chose the second option. I burst through the closet door screaming as some kind of adrenaline boost. I made it to the door, expecting him to lunge for me and grab me, but he didn't. I ran up to my parents' loft and banged on the door. My dad opened it and let me in. I waited with them until the cops entered through the freshly broken back door. Then we left the room to meet them. The man who was sitting on my bed was no longer in the house. We checked every closet, under every bed, every little crevice of the house. The cops recommended we tape a bunch of garbage bags over the door and shut the curtain, and also that we stay awake for the night. My dad stayed in the living room the whole night, and first thing in the morning, he ran to Home Depot to buy a glass pane to fix the door. We're still actively quarantining in this house a week later. I'll send updates if the man returns. I've been staying in my apartment in Jersey City during this coronavirus epidemic. My roommate has since gone home to Ohio to stay with her family during all of this, so I've been in the apartment alone. I've been mostly just watching new movies and shows. I try not to go out too much because my city is pretty bad right now. A couple days ago, I was running extremely low on food, so I had to make a mandatory grocery run. I went to the nearby Trader Joe's wearing a mask and gloves, which, including the insane line and limited stock, turned out to be a production. On my walk home in the dark, I realized the streets were even quieter than they were the last time I went shopping just a week before. Suddenly, out from an alleyway, some guy wearing a mask and gloves approached me. He had a baby wrapped in a hoodie and small blanket in his hands. He seemed very sincere in asking me to let him take his son to my apartment real quick so he could change his diaper and feed him his food. He swore to me that he was clean, and that he really needed this favor for just 5 minutes, that it was an emergency. Hearing the baby's little cries, and the fact that this man even had a child with him and just seemed sincere, the soft part of me agreed. I led him to my apartment building. It was only a short walk from there. We walked up the 3 stories to my apartment, and I led him inside, asking him to close the door behind him. I cleared a spot on the living room table for him to change his child's diaper and whatever. When I turned around, the man was like pacing around, or more like snooping around, I guess. He went into my kitchen to do God knows what. I called over to him that I set up the table for him to use. He didn't answer. I started getting confused. I walked to the kitchen and saw him looking around suspiciously, and what else I saw confused me. The man was standing with what I thought was his child, held in only one hand. It took me a second to understand. It wasn't a child. It was just some baby doll wrapped up in a blanket. I'm assuming one of those realistic ones that make the crying and moaning noises. The man looked at me and pulled out a gun from his right pocket. That's where things went from 1 to 100 real quick. He looked at me with a gun aimed at me and said something along the lines of, "I'm gonna take what I want and you're gonna stay in my sight." Of course, I had to say okay with a gun aimed at my head. I wondered if it could be a BB gun with a tip painted black, but even if it was, I doubted I could overpower him. I couldn't risk it. The man pulled out a big black bag from his backpack and filled it with valuables, including my wallet, some of my roommate's jewelry, kitchen valuables, my brother's Xbox which he lent me, and my iPad. It was sickening to watch, but I was the most scared of him pulling the trigger of that gun. He filled his bag and threw the fake baby in it as well, then he left. I called the cops first thing. They came and helped me in contacting the building owner to see the CCTV footage from the halls. Of course, upon seeing the footage, it didn't help much. The man's face was covered by a mask, making it near impossible to even discover who he was. All I can do is urge everyone to be careful, not to trust anyone, and stay indoors until all this is over. The past month, I've been quarantining in my apartment alone with minimal outside contact because of the virus. My apartment is the downstairs floor of a 2-family house. The upstairs occupant isn't the landlord, he's just another tenant. I'm actually decently acquainted with the guy. His name's Rico. To be honest, he's a bit odd though. Of course, I hadn't seen Rico because I've been quarantining. I do still have to wake up early in the morning though for work, which I report to on my laptop now. A week ago, Rico started making a lot of noise one night. Late night, actually. I was in bed. It was like past 12. I had to be up early. And all of a sudden, I just start hearing constant thumping noises coming from the upstairs level of the house. It sounded like Rico was stomping around in boots or something. I waited for it to hopefully end eventually, but it just kept going on and on and on. Over 20 minutes of the stomping. I was so frustrated that I got up to knock on his door outside. I knocked a few times loud enough for him to hear. He never answered. When I gave up and went back to my room though, thankfully the noise had stopped. I wasn't sure if he heard my knocks and stopped because of that or what, but I didn't care much. I fell into a deep sleep for some time, till I awoke in my dark bedroom. The clock read 2:30 something. I didn't know what exactly woke me up at first. Then I realized it must have been the fact that the room was cold. And I realized my window on the opposite side of the room was open about a foot. I knew for a fact I did not do that. I got up and quietly shut it, looking around my room paranoid. I checked under my bed and in the closet. No one there. It's not like anyone could fit through that opening in the window, but someone actually went out of their way to open that, and that terrified me. I did a scope of the place with all the lights on, and I could confirm there was nobody hiding inside. So I went back to bed with one eye open. Then the noises upstairs started again, thumping and stomping. I couldn't take this anymore. It almost sounded like he was hitting the floor with a hammer or something. I went up to his door again and pounded on it, yelling his name as well. Once again, no answer. I went back inside and grabbed my phone and dug deep for Rico's number. I didn't have it saved. It was buried in my text conversations somewhere. When I found it, I called him. He didn't pick up the first time or the second, but on the third time, he picked up sounding confused and like he had just been woken up. I said in a rather annoyed tone that he needed to stop making the constant noises. He asked what I'm talking about, and I explained the thumping noises. Then he dropped the bomb and told me, "Jared, I'm not in my apartment. I went home to stay with my family a week ago. Call the cops." It suddenly made a lot more sense, and I realized the noises had stopped ever since I went back to the door. I hung up before saying another word and dialed 911, not wasting a second. As I was on the phone talking to the police operator, I heard it clicking at my bedroom window. Someone was outside trying to lift open the window, which I had just locked earlier. I screamed as I realized it, and then yelled at the operator to hurry with the police. She said they were on their way and asked me to describe the man, but I couldn't. It was too dark. He seemed to hear my conversation, I would guess, and walked away from the window. 4 police officers showed up. I led them to the upstairs apartment where the door was unlocked. I walked in behind the officers, and not much searching needed to be done. There was a man with long graying hair down to his shoulders who was sitting on the couch looking up at the ceiling, seemingly laughing. When the officers approached him to arrest him, the man focused in on me, still laughing. He started to point at me, and that's when I had to leave because I was too freaked out. I waited until the man was in one of the police cars before talking to the officers again. I locked Rico's door, and the cops just told me to keep a good eye on the place for the time being. Rico came back the following day to assess what was stolen. He has been staying upstairs since. Remember Chuck E. Cheese? That old arcade with the singing animatronics? Of course you do. I just found out they went bankrupt recently. It made me think back to my horrible experience there as a very little kid. I was no older than 8 or 9. It was like my third and last time ever at a Chuck E. Cheese. This specific location closed down years ago, but it used to be basically down the street from our old house. My mom took my little brother and I, and she let us roam free and do our own thing and play the games, while she sat at one of the tables reading like most of the other parents. I was playing this clown game where you had to shoot the clown's teeth out with this little cannonball shooter. I was playing the games that would get me the most tickets for the prizes. I finished the game again, and the tickets shot out from the ticket slot. That's when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned and jumped in my seat. I was greeted with a giant Chuck E. Cheese mascot in my face. He held out his hand for a high five, and naturally I gave him his high five with a smile. He then pointed at the tickets and gave me a thumbs up. I think I just continued laughing and smiling and said yeah. Then he pointed at the tickets once more and motioned for me to follow him. So I ripped the tickets from the slot and followed the giant mascot. As we walked across the main floor, a couple other kids around like 6 came up to him saying, "Hey Chucky," and he gave them both high fives. I kept following him, wondering if he'd tell the other kids to follow, but he didn't. He would turn back every few seconds to make sure I was still following. Finally, we made it across the main floor by the stage towards this back area, where he waved me to follow him through this employees-only door. From what I remember about how I was feeling, let's just say a combination of weird and excited. We entered this narrow hallway, and I felt kind of special for being allowed access back here. Keep in mind, I had the mind and maturity of a very young child. The mascot led me to this back room where he motioned for me to enter first, so I did. It was this small changing room type of room. It had a few lockers on one wall and one long bench extending half the length of the room. That was it. He entered the room and shut the door behind us, and I noticed he locked it. That's when I became confused and afraid. I thought he was taking me to get a bunch of free tickets. What could he possibly do in this empty room with me? He approached me, put his furry mascot hand on my shoulder, and then started rubbing from my shoulder to my arm. Then he seemed as though he tried to reach lower with both of his hands, and I pushed him off and yelled, "Stop." That's when the person in the suit lifted the mask off his head, revealing some sweaty, middle-aged man underneath. He started to remove the rest of the costume from himself as he told me to be quiet. I sat there watching, shaking, and plotting my way for the door. When I thought he was distracted enough by the suit, I tried to run past him for the door, but he grabbed me and told me to stop. He offered me all the free tickets I wanted if I just behaved. I started to yell and pound on the door. He tried to cover my mouth, but I think he gave up when he realized it wasn't worth the risk for him. I unlocked the door and ran back down the hall in tears. I ran back to my mom, yelling at her about what just happened. She was distraught and went right to the front desk. The girl at the front desk seemed to be in a panic as well, and I think she called for her supervisor. Pretty soon, all the music was stopped and the place was put into a lockdown of sorts, where all the kids were to go to their parents. A bunch of workers ran to the back section, and eventually police showed up outside. I had to give my whole story to a crowd of like 6 people, and I was extremely nervous. The man in the Chucky suit was some random creep who snuck into the back section of the building to dress in one of the suits and apparently lure children to the back. Realizing and looking back at that now as a grown adult is disturbing and disgusting, that I was the victim of a predator. I never found out if that monster was caught. I used to work for Chuck E. Cheese very briefly when I was 21 years old. I was one of the janitors/maintenance workers. I know, not very awe-inspiring. I was broke as hell and needed money. All my job really entailed was cleaning tables and keeping the play areas generally clean. Sounds easy, but there was never really a time to just sit and take a breath. There was always something to clean or take care of. I would also be in charge of turning on and off the animatronics, opening the stage curtains, fixing busted arcade machines, and things of that nature. My shifts would always be later, from like 4 to 10 p.m. My location closed at 8 on weekdays and 9 on weekends. I would stay an hour, sometimes 2 hours after, to get the place in top shape ready for the next day. So this one night, I was working past close like I usually did. Everyone had already left the building, including the other workers, so I was the last one in the building. I was dragging my cleaning cart around the arcade area. I had already turned off all the game machines. I was by that space-themed arcade machine where you had to press the button at the right moment to stop the light on the jackpot bulb. As I was passing by this machine, the space-themed music suddenly emits from the machine at a very loud volume, and all the lights start flashing again. I felt like my heart was in my throat, that's how much it startled me. I fiddled with my keys to access the control port of the machine to turn it off again. I'd never seen anything like that happen before. It suddenly just freaked me out, only because I was all alone in that big building pretty late at night. The weirdness didn't stop there though. By this point in the night, I had already shut down the animatronics on the stage, so when I heard Chucky's pre-recorded laugh break the silence of the room, my heart started pounding again. The laugh was short and cut off. It almost sounded glitchy. I ditched my cleaning cart to go backstage and check on the animatronics, and I could see they were in their idle modes now, meaning they would move their limbs and heads around every so often. I would have to go to the control room to turn them off, but this was the second strange thing to happen that night. I started getting paranoid that someone else was in the building with me, but that thought was interrupted when I noticed that the Chucky animatronic was facing me, and its head angled down perfectly to look as though it was looking at me. It was bizarre. Bizarre that I was finding it that disturbing. I'm not crazy, but for my own peace of mind, with my eyes on the Chucky animatronic, I walked past it, closer to the control room. I waited there for a few seconds, and then the animatronic spun 90 degrees to face me once more, perfectly. I swear it was once again looking right at me, and then the laughter emitted once again from the animatronic. But in a creepy, glitchy, cut-off manner, this time much louder, obviously because I was right next to it. I ran to the control room to hit the switch to turn everything off on the stage once more. I left the control room, and the Chucky animatronic was still facing the direction it was moments before. I left the stage through the curtain and just felt uneasy. I was starting to think maybe it was all just getting to my head. But that's when I heard the horrible laugh again come from the stage behind the curtains. That was the last straw. I took my card, clocked out, and left. I texted my boss the next day that I had to leave early because I was feeling extremely sick. He said it wasn't a problem, but he never mentioned anything about the animatronics being left on. And when I asked him if the animatronics had some kind of motion detecting feature to look at people, he said no, they didn't. I'm not the most superstitious guy, but I firmly believe I wasn't the only presence in that building that night. And I don't mean there was another person in there. This is a story from my childhood that I don't like to look back on too much. I was 13. My mom brought my two little sisters and I to Chuck E. Cheese one evening. My sisters are 4 and 6 years younger than me, so it was more for them, and my mom just wanted me to come along. My mom was playing games with my sisters, so I went to do my own thing. It was my only time ever at Chuck E. Cheese, so I was trying to play every game at least once. Eventually, a worker in a red polo shirt came up to me. He was in his lower to mid-20s, I'd say. He didn't seem that old. He asked me if I wanted some more tokens. I said, yeah, sure. He told me to follow him. He led me through this sketchy back door, which led to a back exit. I asked him where he was leading me. He said to his truck. He told me not to tell anyone, but that he had access to all the tokens he wanted and just kept piles of them in his car. I stopped following when I realized he was leading me to his car. I told him my mom would be mad. He tried to push that I follow him a little more, but gave up. Before I walked back inside, he asked for my AIM username, and I gave it to him. I was excited for new friends on AIM. For those of you who don't know, AIM was an instant messenger that was all the rage before smartphones and texting really became a thing. I don't remember his username. All I know, it was something with his name in it, which was Ben. I would sign on to AIM every single night, including that night after Chuck E. Cheese. I signed in, and I had a few friends online. Next thing I knew, I got a message from Ben, so I added him to my buddy list. He said, hey, it's Ben from earlier. I replied, what's up, and we started chatting. He chatted with me as if we were good friends already. I asked him how he was able to get all the tokens he wanted, and he said it's easy when you work there. He told me he was going to come to my house that night with a bunch of tokens. I told him, no, it's okay. And he told me, no, it's fine. You live really close to me anyway. I replied, how do you know where I live? And he said he followed my mom's van on our way home. I blocked his account immediately. I was beyond scared. I told my friends about it on AIM. Some of them said I should tell my parents or call the police. But I waited. Maybe he was bluffing. But no, he wasn't. I heard a truck pull up outside through my open window. I looked out the window and saw the black truck that Ben guy was leading me towards earlier. I saw him get out from the truck, and I know he spotted me because he started walking over to my window. I pulled the window in and locked it, and then shut the blind. By that point, he was already halfway to my window, and he was waving his arms at me. I ran to my mom to tell her. She didn't find it funny, thinking I was kidding at first. But I convinced her after she looked out the window and saw the black truck begin to speed down the road. My mom wanted me to show her the AIM conversation, but I couldn't, as I had deleted him off my buddy list and blocked him. My parents called the police, of course, but that was just for peace of mind. They couldn't do anything besides make a report. The next day, my mom called the Chuck E. Cheese and asked about a Ben. They said they had no Bens who worked there. There were also no employees matching that guy's description. The Chuck E. Cheese eventually handed the CCTV footage from the day before to the police department for an investigation, which turned up no results. My family never went to a Chuck E. Cheese ever again. I live in a normal suburban town. It was 4th of July weekend, so I had a mini party in my backyard. My parents were away, so it would work out perfectly. I invited about 20 people. We have a pool, so I told people to bring their bathing suits. I also had some fireworks left over from last year that I told everyone we'd shoot off towards the end of the night. I tried to keep the gathering strictly in the backyard because I didn't fully trust people not to make a mess inside the house. Everything went fine. Anywhere from 20 to 30 people showed up. Everyone stayed in the yard. Some people jumped in the pool, others played drinking games, and later in the night we shot off some fireworks in the street. The party started to die down after 12, and by 1:30 everyone was gone. There were a million red plastic cups in the yard and tons of empty cans and bottles. But that was a mess to worry about tomorrow. I was beat. I went inside and changed out of my clothes and brushed my teeth, then crawled into bed. I was pretty buzzed, so I didn't think I'd have any trouble falling asleep. Suddenly, outside, I heard firecrackers going off. It sounded like it was right outside my window, in our backyard. I got up and looked out the window, and to my confusion and downright horror, I saw a line of firecrackers going off next to our pool. My initial reaction was to yell out the window who did that. I figured it had to be one of my friends who stayed behind pranking me. I ran downstairs into the back door. I slid open the glass door but kept the bug screen door closed. I looked around the backyard and said again, "Who's out there?" By now the firecrackers had finished going off. Someone was back there, and they just set them off. That doesn't happen by accident. I texted as many people as I could think to, and then the group chat asking who was still at my house. Only a few people answered, most likely because a lot of people were asleep already. Everyone who answered said they're in bed or at home though. I stepped outside into the backyard and looked around for a minute. And when I saw no one, I went back in, shut the door and locked it, and went back upstairs to my room. I was barely in bed for 5 minutes before hearing something come from the upstairs living room down the hall. Then I heard the sound of a beer pong ball falling off the table and bouncing on the wood floor. My heart started to race. Was someone in the house? Did one of my friends pass out on one of the downstairs couches? Or maybe in one of the other bedrooms? While this seemed like a possibility, I wasn't about to go out there. I got out of bed and went to the door to put my ear up to it and listen. I didn't hear anything for a moment. I waited, and then, clear as day, I heard footsteps approaching my door, then the doorknob jiggling. The door was locked. There was a loud bang on the door. I screamed through the door to get out of here or I'll shoot you. A deep male's voice on the other side said, "Jay, you in there?" And I heard another deep voice in the room with me say, "Yeah." I turned to the corner by my drawers and realized there was someone there. I screamed my soul out as this man came over to me holding what looked like a gun in his hand. He then put his hand over my mouth and told me to shut up or he'd kill me. He then unlocked the door and opened it, and there was another masked man. They whispered to each other as they had me at gunpoint, now sitting on the bed. One of them then said to me, "Stay right there and don't move." The other guy left the room and went straight to my parents' room. He came back and asked the combination to my parents' safe, which I said I had no idea, which was the truth. There were a total of 3 intruders in the house. One kept me at gunpoint while the other 2 pilfered the house, stealing my mom's jewelry that was left out, along with any other valuables they found. After the longest 10 minutes of my life, one of the men yelled, "Let's go," and the man who had me at gunpoint left the room, and I heard them all hurry out the back door. I tried to see what kind of car they left in through a window, but it appeared they didn't park near my house. I called 911 right away. As soon as police arrived, they asked if we had any cameras around the house, which we didn't. They then asked if I got any of the names or saw any of their faces, and all I could give them was that one of them was referred to as Jay by the others. They asked if I saw the getaway vehicle, and I said no. The police asked a bunch of neighboring houses if they had cameras that may have picked up on the robbers, and after my neighbors all reviewed their doorbell cameras, none of them picked anything up. I think my house was targeted by a group who saw I was having a party, and they set the firecrackers off to lead me outside of the house so they could sneak in. That's the most likely explanation to me. My parents were livid with me for having the party, as they believed that led to the robbery. But they also were relieved I'm okay, and sympathetic that I had to experience this. Because of this experience, I'm a strong advocate for having security cameras around your house. was 4th of July 2015. The park by my house was having their annual fireworks show, but it always gets way too crowded and chaotic. Plus, parking is non-existent. Little did most people know there's a little sump next to the park that had a perfect view of the fireworks show. I found this out through one of my friends one year. This sump was accessible through one of the dead-end residential streets that ran alongside the park. Since the 4th was on a Saturday this year, it would probably be even more crowded, but it would also make a perfect date. I was talking to this girl Ashley I met in one of my classes the previous semester, and we'd already been on a few dates over the course of a few months. I asked her if she'd want to go to the fireworks show with me, and she said she already really wanted to go, so absolutely. She came to my house first, and then we walked from my house to the park since it was so close, and we were bringing alcohol. I told her we'd have our own little private spot to watch the show at that no one else really knew about, and she said she was super down. Along with some tequila and soda, I brought a big blanket for us to lay on in my backpack. There was already a lot of commotion by the park entrance. We walked right past it as the cars were piling up in the parking lot. We continued down the dead end where the sump was. The sump was rectangular and fenced off, but it was very easy to get inside. The gate wasn't even locked. Inside the sump was just a bunch of trees, and then at the bottom of it, a small grass clearing, where we planned to lay out the blanket. I led us to the gate, which yet again wasn't locked, and I quietly opened and closed it. I told her to be careful as we walked downhill into the sump. It was around 8 o'clock, which was when the fireworks were supposed to start. I laid out the blanket on the smoothest part of the ground. I didn't take into account how dark it would be in there before the fireworks started, so we both turned on our phone flashlights and laid them down just as temporary lights. We started making tequila sodas right away. From down in the sump, we couldn't really hear any other people from up in the park, just the occasional car horns honking. It was right around the time we started to first drink that both of us heard something from behind us. It was like the sound of brush being stepped on. We turned around to see darkness. I pointed my flashlight over there, but it didn't really reach that far. The iPhones back then were like the 6s. I don't remember their flashlights being the best. Ashley asked me how likely it was that other people would come down here. I replied that other than a couple of my friends knowing about it, I doubted anyone else would come down. I explained to her that it could have been a small animal. The first fireworks were shot into the air, which startled us. The fireworks would light up the entire sump briefly though, especially the bigger ones and when multiple were shot at once. At this point, we drank and watched the fireworks for a solid few minutes, before again, I heard something behind us. I don't think Ashley heard it, but she looked back when I looked and asked what I was looking at. I said nothing, not wanting to scare her. This was my idea after all, but now I was getting paranoid. I decided to turn around and stare into the trees and brush, and as the sump lit up again from multiple big fireworks exploding, I saw a black figure standing in the trees and brush above us. They appeared to be hiding. I whispered, "There's someone up there." She turned and looked, but now it went dark again because there was a short few-second gap in fireworks. When the sump lit up again, the figure I saw wasn't there anymore. I surely freaked her out though, because she said she wanted to leave. Since we were both definitely creeped out now, we agreed to leave while the fireworks were still going, lighting the sump up. I packed up the blanket and alcohol, and of course, the fireworks show ended right there. It was now dark and quiet again in the sump, so we turned our flashlights back on and walked up the hill. As we neared the top, I couldn't help but shine my flashlight into the trees in the general vicinity that I saw that figure before, and I felt my heart skip a beat, seeing a black figure again, maybe 10 feet away. It appeared to be a person in a black hoodie or robe with the hood up, even though it was like an 82-degree night. They were standing behind a big tree, but then, as if in response to the light, they started to run through the brush at us. I pushed Ashley along to hurry up as they yelled to go. We got the hell out of there and basically ran down the street until we were around other people. We weren't followed. I'm not sure what that person was doing in there, but it seemed they were stalking us the entire fireworks show, and them running towards us meant they wanted to hurt us. I only saw one person, so I believe they were alone, but I could be wrong. I stayed clear from going in that sump ever again. After several friends of mine and I were done lighting off fireworks, one of my friends, Zach, took about 4 of us to this unfinished house in a relatively new neighborhood. 2 of the people became disinterested pretty quickly, so they left before we even started examining the house, leaving only 3 of us, Zach, myself, and Adam. None of the walls were completed on the house. It mainly just consisted of floorboards and 2x4s holding up the place. You could see outside in most parts of the house, and the basement had a cement floor and cement walls. The house consisted of 2 floors and a basement, so 3 floors in total. The steps were completed enough so that we could travel up and down them easily. As we started inspecting the house, Zach told us to keep our phone flashlights off as much as possible because the houses next to us were finished and inhabited, and the people living there might call the cops if they noticed us snooping around. We therefore were mainly just going off the moonlight from outside for vision. The 3 of us stuck together most of the time. As soon as we walked upstairs, we could hear a voice from the main floor or the basement, so we would run downstairs to find out what it is, and as soon as we did that, we would hear a noise from upstairs, so we would run up there. This pattern continued for a good while. We assumed the noises were just the wind knocking over pieces of wood, pipes, or whatever else that was lying around, or it was some kind of animal running around the house. Eventually, as we were walking slowly in the basement, trying to discover who or what it was making the noises, I saw someone slowly walking up the stairs next to me. I could see a light emanate from his or her phone, but it wasn't strong enough for me to be able to see who he or she was. I whispered to Zach and Adam, "Is that you?" They both said it wasn't them, and it turns out that they were both right in front of me. Shortly after I asked that, I saw a bunch of pipes that were leaned against the unfinished wall fall over down the stairs. It didn't look like they fell over by accident. It looked like someone deliberately pushed them over. At that point, I knew whatever we were hearing was not an animal or the wind. I knew that someone else was in the house. After that encounter, the 3 of us stormed out of the house. We all stood on the neighborhood road a decent distance from the house, discussing what just happened. Zach was convinced that the person I saw was one of the 2 friends who decided to leave earlier. I told him that there was no way it was either of them. One of them was a girl who didn't want to get her shoes dirty, and the other was a guy who was dating this girl and was around her all the time, so I couldn't picture either of them doing that. I tried to convince him that it wasn't them, but he didn't fully believe me. He then realized that he lost his keys and he had to go back in the house to find them anyway. That left Adam and I to stand around to wait for him. As Adam and I were waiting for Zach, I thought I could see a big, dark figure coming from around the right side of the house, but I couldn't tell for sure. We were still trying to not use our flashlights so the neighbors wouldn't notice us. After a few minutes, Zach came back with his keys and said he saw someone in the house again. I told him what I saw. Still convinced that it was our other 2 friends messing with us, he walked around the left side of the house. Adam and I followed him. When he got to the back of the house, I saw him jump up and say, "Run." We ran away. He later said he saw a tall, dark figure reaching his arms up and slowly moving towards him. I ran out to the road in front of the house. I thought both Adam and Zach were following me, but I could only see Zach behind me. When I stopped running, there was a giant dumpster in front of me. I was on the left side of it and Zach was on the other side. I saw Zach look to his right, to an area behind the dumpster that I couldn't see from where I was standing. I heard him say, "We don't want any trouble." He then told me to run to his truck. He drove me to the house in his truck and Adam drove separately. Apparently Adam had already gone to his car. I ran towards the truck and we took off. Zach told me that he saw a big dark figure approaching him. After he said we don't want any trouble, he saw the figure going behind the dumpster, heading in my direction, and that's why he told me to run for the truck. Adam later mentioned that as he took off in his car, he saw 3 figures running after him in the rearview mirror. Chances are these figures could have been neighbors messing with us, but the way in which they acted was very strange. Considering how big and tall some of them seemed to be, it's hard for me to believe that they were just teenagers. Zach was in his early 20s, Adam was in his late teens, and I was in my late 20s when this happened. I can't help but wonder who those people were, and how capable they were of doing something far worse than just messing with us and scaring us away. I can't help but wonder if maybe they were some weird members of a cult who regularly got together in that house late at night, and that's why they were trying to scare us away. Since this was the 4th of July, there was a bigger chance of weirdos walking around. But Zach said that there were people who chased after him another time he was at that same house. I wasn't there with him that time, so I can't go into too much detail on that story, but I wonder if those were the same people. When I was 18, I was a babysitter for 3 young boys across town from me. They were 3, 5, and 7. I'll just call them Adam 3, Bobby 5, and Chris 7, ABC. Adam and Chris were the easiest to take care of. Adam was a surprisingly well-behaved toddler, and Chris just liked to play his video games and watch TV. Bobby, on the other hand, was very moody, a picky eater, and difficult to get to go to sleep. I had worked for this family for months, and I was somewhat close with their mom Lucy, who was raising them by herself. They had a decently modest middle-class house. Lucy's parents would help her out with finances and such. All 3 boys had their own rooms. Lucy worked nights at the time, so I'd always babysit till around midnight on weeknights, and my college classes would start in the afternoon, so it worked out schedule and sleep-wise. One night after playing some Nintendo Wii games with Chris, I put Adam to bed, and not long after, Bobby. Chris's bedtime would be 9:30, Bobby's would be 9. After tucking Bobby in, I started telling Chris to start changing into his PJs after his next game was over. Chris insisted I play one more game of Wii tennis with him, so I made a deal that he'd go to bed after if I did. During our game though, Bobby started crying for me up from his room. I paused the game and went upstairs. As I entered his room, he said there's a monster in his closet. I laughed, and I believe I pinched his cheek and said something along the lines of, "There's no such thing as monsters, but I'll leave the door open so you feel safer." Then I asked if that made him feel better, and he nodded. Chris was downstairs calling for me to come back, all annoyed, so I went back to the game of tennis and we resumed, and we eventually finished the game with no interruptions. At this point, Chris went upstairs to change into his pajamas and brush his teeth, and I was alone in the kitchen watching TV. That's when Bobby's cries from upstairs echoed down again. I went up to his room again, and he was hiding under his covers. He said once again, "There's a monster in the closet, I heard it." I looked at the closet door, which was closed. I looked at it for a while actually, then back at Bobby and asked, "Why do you think there's a monster in there?" And he replied, "I keep hearing it moving." I asked him if he wanted me to take a look, and he shook his head no. I walked closer to the closet anyway, and he said don't. I didn't take him seriously, till I heard something in the closet myself. It was very clearly the sound of something alive in that closet that tapped into the door, or something behind the door. Bobby whispered, "See?" I turned around and picked up Bobby and said we're going to another room. I also grabbed Chris from the bathroom and brought him into Adam's room, where I locked the door. Adam and Lucy's room share a Jack and Jill bathroom with 2 entrances. I went into the bathroom and called Lucy and quietly asked if there was a possibility of there being an animal in the house or in the walls, because there were sounds that Bobby was hearing that I heard myself. She sounded concerned right away and wanted me to check the closet. I kept her on the phone as I went back to Bobby's room. My discovering the closet door to now be ajar confirmed that there was someone in the house with us. I told Lucy, and she freaked out, telling me it was most likely her crazy ex and to get the kids out of the house. I suddenly felt like my life were in danger, and her ex was going to come out of nowhere and run at me. I went to Adam's room and managed to get the 3 kids out of the room, but just as I did, I heard the front door to the house slam shut. I peeked down into the living room, and there was no one there, but the front door was shut. He must have made an exit while he could. I went to lock the door, then called 911. Lucy came home from work early, and was there when the police came. Without cameras or anything, there was no proof that it was her ex, though. Her ex is the father of Adam, but she keeps him away from her because of their past that I won't get into for her privacy. Long story short, he can't take it, and she just recently blocked his number, which would explain the possibility of him breaking into the house. The police recommended changing the locks on the doors and such to Lucy. She understood I wouldn't feel comfortable staying in that house for a while after that, so she started letting the kids stay with a relative or one of her parents coming to watch the kids. I don't know what happened after that because we kind of fell out of contacts. I didn't really like the fact that she was okay with me checking the closet when she was already suspicious that it was her ex. It was definitely a horrifying experience. I had just turned 14. It was the summer of 2012. I was looking for a job. My grandma had told me about a family that she was friends with, and they had two boys, Alexander and Danny. Alexander was 10 and Danny was 5. I was very excited to have a summer job and get some extra spending money. I went over to meet the family with my grandma, and they were friendly enough. The two boys seemed easy to handle and not babyish or whiny at all. In fact, the boys and I were playing with their trucks, getting along great. I set up a date with the parents, and they actually had a dinner to go to the next night. So the next night, it became time for me to head over to the house. It was a humid, rainy night. I walked into the house, and the parents were just getting ready to leave. They gave me a paper with rules and such, things they didn't want the kids to do and their routines. They wrote a little something on the side that said Danny swears he hears tapping on his window every night, but not to believe it, because they think it's just a silly story that kids make up. I was only 14 myself, so reading this was a little unnerving, but I sort of forgot about it. It was a chill night. We watched TV and played with toys. They didn't give me any sort of trouble, but when I told the boys it was time to get ready for bed, I noticed Danny starting to stall and get kind of distressed. I ignored it, thinking he's only 5 and probably wants to stay up later. Eventually, I got them both to settle down and go to sleep. About an hour and a half had passed. It was now 10 p.m. I heard Danny groggily but loudly yell for me. I rushed up to him and asked what was the matter. He told me he heard the tapping noise again. I instantly felt uneasy and nervous, but I just flicked on the light and looked out the window. Nothing outside except darkness and the solar lights from the neighbor's driveway. I calmly told Danny that it was probably just some bugs since it's summer after all. He seemed to come at ease when I said this and laid back down. As I walked out of the room to shut his door, I heard a faint tap noise against his window. I got the chills as I flicked on the light again and looked out the window. And again, nothing. I kept telling myself that it was just bugs flying into the window, but something deep down told me to do something. I told Danny not to worry as I opened the window and yelled out, "This is private property, I'm gonna call the police." Moments after I did so, I heard a frantic scurrying into the forest that was across the yard. By now, I must have had goosebumps all along my arms and legs, and I immediately called the police for real. I called the parents right after, and they were thankfully already on their way home. The police arrived and didn't seem at all surprised by what I had told them. They had gotten other reports in the area for quite some time about some stranger going up to people's windows at night, looking through them and tapping on them. They said they got calls telling them the same thing almost every week. Danny's parents just never believed him and I guess took it as some little kid's story or imagination, but it turned out to be very real. They searched the whole neighborhood and never found the person. After that night, I told the family in the nicest way possible that I didn't feel comfortable watching their kids anymore. And I still think to this day what would have happened if anything went differently. Like, God forbid the window was unlocked or open. Maybe sometimes parents shouldn't just brush whatever their young children say as just their imagination. This happened when I was 8 years old, and my little sister was 6. It's a memory that's kind of scarring, to the point that I just remember it so vividly, even as an adult, and it's something that stayed with me. Our parents hired a one-time babysitter for this weekend that they'd be away on a couples trip. It was some 16-year-old boy that responded to an ad that my mom posted in the public library. He happened to go to the high school that my parents went to, so I feel like they felt a safer connection with him. He was watching us for 3 nights from Thursday to Sunday. His name was Nathan. I don't know his last name. If I did, I'd say it. Most of the first night is a blur. I was only 8 after all. I remember not much other than playing Ratchet & Clank on my PlayStation in the basement all night because I was obsessed. Same thing the next day, on Friday. I was playing Ratchet & Clank for so long that I guess Nathan came down to build a rapport with me and asked to play with me. He told me he also liked the game, so we played multiplayer versus mode. From what I remember, I actually was having fun and started to like Nathan. The next day, I had my friend Zachary over and we played soccer in the backyard, which Nathan volunteered to ref for as he came outside with my little sister. Basically, he was a completely normal seeming dude for my 8-year-old mind. Zachary left not long after we all ate the pizza that Nathan ordered with the money I assume my parents left for food. That night before going to sleep, I was playing on my DS in bed, when Nathan came in and asked if I wanted to play more video games, and I'm sure I respectfully told him I'm tired. He would leave as expected, But that's not where this ends. I always was a heavy sleeper as a kid. Not anymore, but when I was 8, waking up in the middle of the night wasn't a regular occurrence. So waking up in my pitch black room was definitely a weird thing to happen that night. I remember flipping on my side after hearing my door closing. I looked across the room towards the door, and as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw someone standing in the corner of the room, and before I could digest what was happening and scream or react in any way, I heard Nathan go shh and whisper, "It's me." I didn't respond, but then he slowly got closer to my bed, pulled the covers off of me, and I swear he was about to get in the bed before I screamed stop or something along those lines, and he froze. I got out of bed and left the room. I went to my little sister's room, took a blanket from under her bed, and laid on the floor shaking, feeling extremely confused and uncomfortable. The whole next day, I didn't see Nathan. I knew he was in the house because he fed my little sister breakfast, but I knew he was avoiding me now. I couldn't exactly call my parents because I didn't know either of their cell phone numbers. It was a weird long day of me staying in my room and playing games with my little sister. Nathan never came in once. That night, I couldn't sleep for obvious reasons, and I don't know how much time passed before hearing my door creak open again. This time I didn't look up. I laid there until I heard the door close, and then a few moments of silence later, I looked up to the door, but he wasn't there this time. I turned on the lamp to confirm this, but even at 8, I knew he was creeping around again, and I wanted to go to sleep in my sister's room to protect her in my mind. I got up and took my pillows and blanket to my sister's room, and lo and behold, Nathan was already halfway towards my sister's bed in the pitch black room. I yelled at him to get away from her, and he told me to calm down, he's just checking on her. He hurried out of the room, and I locked the door. That was the last time I ever saw him. The next morning, I woke up on my sister's floor and told her let's play games in her room until Mom and Dad get back, which was early in the day, thank God. We heard our parents get home and talk with Nathan outside, but we didn't leave her room until he was gone. My parents asked me why I slept on her floor. I don't remember what I said, but I know I didn't tell them the real reason. In fact, I never did. I regret it often, not telling them all those years ago, so that Nathan guy would get in trouble. I'm scared because of me, he might have actually at some point successfully hurt a child. It's sadly something I kept bottled up my whole childhood, simply because I felt too embarrassed and awkward to tell anyone. I was 26 when this happened, and it was my first time ever going to Coachella. My friend Alyssa and I had talked about going for years, but either money got in the way or one of us couldn't get time off work. That year, everything finally lined up, so we actually committed to it. We flew out to California, rented a little 2-bedroom Airbnb, and made a whole trip out of it. We were both really excited because neither of us had ever been to a festival that big before. We had both been to smaller concerts and local stuff, but nothing on that level. The whole first day honestly felt like stepping into another world. Everywhere you looked, there were huge crowds, weird outfits, music coming from different directions, and people acting like they had no responsibilities at all. Best way to put it, it was a fairy tale world. It was kind of overwhelming at first, but in a good way. We had a really good first 2 days, nothing bad happened. We saw a bunch of artists we liked, took pictures everywhere, ate overpriced food, and stayed out late. We were tired by the end of each night, but it was worth it. By the third day, we were exhausted, but it was that kind of exhausted where you know you just have to push through because it's the last day and you don't want to waste it. Before the trip, Alyssa had brought up the idea of bringing Molly. I had only done it one other time years before, and it had been fine, so I agreed. We kept saying we'd save it for the last day, and that's exactly what we did. Looking back, I wish more than anything I never touched it. We took it in the late afternoon before one of the sets we were really excited for. At first, I didn't feel much. We were walking around trying to get closer to one of the stages, and I remember saying to Alyssa that I thought maybe it was weak or old because it wasn't hitting me. She said the same thing because she wasn't feeling much either. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then, out of nowhere, it started kicking in hard. At first, I actually liked it. I felt lighter, more social, and everything around me seemed brighter and more exciting. The music sounded amazing. I remember thinking that I understood why people did it at festivals. But after maybe an hour, something started bothering me. I kept noticing the same person. At first I thought I was imagining it. There were thousands of people there, so of course you're gonna accidentally notice the same outfit or the same face more than once. But this wasn't like that. It was the same actual guy. The first time I really noticed him, he was maybe 20 feet away in the crowd. He looked older than most people around us, maybe around 35. He had dark hair, kind of scruffy facial hair, and was wearing a black shirt and boots, which already made him stand out because most people there were dressed way lighter and more colorful. He wasn't doing anything crazy, he was just standing there looking in our direction. I didn't let it bother me at first. Then later I saw him again near one of the drink stands, then again when we were moving between stages, then again when Alyssa and I were standing off to the side near a fence trying to decide where to go next. After the fourth or fifth time, I told Alyssa I kept seeing the same guy everywhere. She laughed and right away said it was probably just the Molly and that I was focusing too hard on random people. I remember laughing a little too because I didn't want to sound too paranoid, but it was getting hard to brush off. It wasn't like I was just noticing him in the distance once in a while. It felt like every time I turned around he was there. Not right next to me, but always somewhere in view. Hours went by like that. I was trying to still enjoy myself, but the high had started feeling off. It stopped being that warm, fun feeling and started turning into this restless, overstimulated feeling. My jaw tensed up, my heart felt too fast, and I couldn't seem to relax. I told myself I was probably dehydrated or tired. We had been doing a lot all weekend, barely sleeping, walking around in the heat, drinking, everything. At one point when we were packed into the crowd waiting for another set, that guy finally came right up to me. It happened so suddenly that I froze for a second. He came up on my side smiling and started trying to dance near me like he was just some random friendly festival guy. Then he leaned in and started saying stuff to me that I could barely hear over the music, but it was obvious he was flirting. I remember him saying I looked really good and asking if I was there with anyone. I told him I was there with my friend and tried to be polite about it because I didn't want to set him off or make a scene. I kind of smiled and shook my head and said I was good. He kept hovering though. It wasn't aggressive yet, but it was pushy enough to make me uncomfortable. I turned to pull Alyssa closer to me so we could just move away, and that was when I realized she wasn't there anymore. I started turning in circles looking for her, thinking maybe she just moved a few feet away, but I couldn't see her anywhere. That made me panic way faster than it normally would because of how off I already felt. The guy noticed right away that I was looking around and asked if I lost my friend. I said yes. Then he said he could help me look for her. There was something about the way he said it that made me instantly not trust him at all. It was too eager. I just told him no thanks and started pushing my way out of the crowd. He didn't grab me or anything, but I could feel him watching me leave. I finally got away from that stage and found a patch of grass farther back where it was quieter and less packed. I sat down because I felt like my body was shutting down on me. My vision started getting weird in a way I'd never felt before. The best way I can describe it is that everything looked squiggly. Not blurry exactly, but like nothing would stay still. The lights, the people, even the ground all had this shaky look to them. It scared me because I knew then that I had taken too much or had some kind of bad reaction. I started calling Alyssa over and over. The calls kept failing or not going through because the service there was terrible. I probably called her 10 times before one finally connected. When she picked up, I could barely hear her, but I just kept telling her where I was and that I needed her to come get me because something was wrong. It felt like forever before she found me, but it was probably only around 15 minutes. She could tell right away I was not okay. I told her I needed to leave, and she didn't argue with me. We ended up leaving the festival way earlier than we planned because I was having such a bad high. The walk out felt endless. Every noise felt too loud, and every person brushing past me made me jump. I kept looking around, half expecting to see that same guy again, but I didn't. Back at the Airbnb, both of us were completely drained. We had one more night there, and then we were flying home the next evening. Alyssa started talking about packing some of her stuff up that night so she wouldn't have to do it in the morning, but I told her I'd do mine tomorrow. I just wanted to lay down. My body was exhausted in a way that overpowered everything else. Even though I was still high, I felt so physically dead that I just crawled into bed, shut the light off, and laid there in the dark. I didn't feel normal, but I felt too tired to care. I must have drifted off into this half-sleep state because I wasn't fully out, but I definitely lost track of time. Then at some point, I opened my eyes. I have no idea what woke me up. Maybe a sound, maybe just my body being on edge. But the second I looked toward the bedroom doorway, I saw a figure standing there. It was tall and completely still, just inside the doorway, facing me. At first, my brain couldn't even process what I was looking at. I thought maybe Alyssa was standing there for some reason, but it was too tall and broad. Then I focused on the face. Even in the dark, I could tell. It was the man from the festival. I know how insane that sounds, especially with the state I was in, but that's exactly what I saw. He stood there looking at me from a few feet away from my bed. I remember this horrible, cold feeling going through my whole body. Then I started screaming. Not just yelling, full-on screaming as loud as I could while throwing the covers over my head like that was going to do something. I kept screaming until Alyssa came into my room. The second she turned on the light, there was nobody there. The doorway was empty. The room was empty. Alyssa kept asking me what happened, and I was crying so hard I could barely get the words out. I told her I saw the guy from the festival standing in my doorway. She looked freaked out by how serious I was, but she kept telling me that it had to be the drugs and that I was still having a bad high. I honestly wanted to believe her, because the other option was way worse. But what bothered me was how real it looked. It didn't feel dreamlike at all. It felt like waking up and seeing an actual person in the room. I begged Alyssa to sleep in the bed with me that night, and she did. Neither of us wanted to go back to sleep after that, so we laid there talking quietly for a while with the lights on in the hallway. She kept trying to calm me down and make normal conversation. Eventually, somehow, we both drifted off. The next morning, I woke up to Alyssa screaming my name and shaking me. For a second, I thought maybe I was still dreaming. Then I sat up and saw her standing near my bedroom doorway, staring at the floor. I looked down and saw muddy boot prints on the hardwood. I still get chills thinking about it. They started near the front part of the house and came down the hall. Then they stopped right at the doorway, exactly where I had seen that figure standing. After that, the prints turned around and went back down the hall toward the front door. I remember just staring at them, feeling this rush of sickness go through me. It was like my whole body dropped. That was the moment I realized what I saw was not some Molly hallucination. Somebody had really been inside that house while we were sleeping, or while I was half asleep. And unless there was some impossible coincidence, it was him. Alyssa looked just as scared as I felt. We started checking everything right away. We made sure the front door was locked now, checked the windows, checked both bedrooms, the bathroom, every room. Nothing obvious was missing, which somehow made it creepier to me. It meant whoever came in wasn't just trying to steal something. We packed faster than I thought possible. Neither of us showered, ate, or even really talked much. We just threw everything into our suitcases and got out of there. Once we were out, we contacted the Airbnb host and told them someone had broken in during the night. I remember sending pictures of the prints because I wanted proof that I wasn't crazy. The host sounded shocked and apologetic, but by then I didn't care. I just wanted to leave. We spent the rest of that day basically on edge until it was finally time to go to the airport. We made it home safely and nothing else happened, but that whole trip has stayed with me ever since. What bothers me most is not knowing exactly how he found us, assuming it really was him. Maybe he followed us when we left. Maybe he saw us call a ride. Maybe he watched from farther away than I realized. I don't know. I just know I saw that man at the festival over and over, then I saw him in the doorway, and the boot prints proved someone had actually been there. Ever since that happened, I have never touched Molly again or any drug like it. People joke about bad trips, but that experience permanently changed how I think. Even now, I guess due to PTSD, I still glance at the bedroom doorway first before anything else. Over the summer, my girlfriend from college, Valentina, invited me to come visit her family. Her family lives in San Diego, California. My parents basically forced me to go because I wasn't doing anything else that summer besides working and sleeping. It was a Friday afternoon, and I had just gotten off my plane. The flight felt like forever since I was flying across the country. I got a text from Valentina telling me to come outside so she could pick me up. She and her dad came to pick me up in an old Toyota. I don't remember much from the car ride to her beach house, though. We pulled up to a beautiful villa on the beach. Valentina's dad helped me get my suitcase out and escorted me to my room. My room was on the lower level, separated from everyone else upstairs. For a guest room, however, it had a great view of the beach. I could also see the side stairs that led to the front door on the second floor. I unpacked my clothes and toiletries, trying to get settled into my room. Then I heard knocking on my door. It was Valentina. She wanted me to meet her siblings, but I'm not going to talk about them much, as they're irrelevant to the story. However, she introduced me to her mom. Her mom was a nice older woman. She made me feel welcomed. Valentina ended the conversation when she said she was taking me to the beach. She went upstairs to change. I went to my room to do the same. We got on the beach and the sun was setting. She told me it's a great time to take some pictures for my Instagram. Being the nice and helpful person I am, I agreed I would take her pictures. The beach was crowded, so I knew this would be difficult. I probably took 100 pictures before she was finally satisfied. I looked back at the pictures, and something was off about them. I noticed a man in the background of every picture, sometimes staring at Valentina from behind or staring at me. I looked at the general direction he was standing in the most recent picture, but he was gone. I muttered to myself, what the f***? I tried telling Valentina, but she just shrugged it off. I started to feel very paranoid. I always had the fear of someone stalking me. I knew I had to be a man and hide this fear. Later, Valentina and I went back out to the beach. It was around midnight, and one of her best friends was having a bonfire. We walked down to the beach to the gathering. After being a social butterfly for a while, my boss called me. He was pretty chill, so I told him about my trip and when I would be back. As I was talking to him, I saw a black figure on the beach, just staring at me. I pretended not to see him and just turned the other direction. I guess my boss noticed my sudden pause because he asked, "Are you okay?" I responded quickly saying, "Yeah, I was just a little surprised by what I just saw." He didn't question it and immediately got back on topic. The party started to die down. People were finishing up their drinks and getting into their Ubers. I asked Valentina's best friend, who was sober, if she could drive us home. She agreed to take us home since we were a 2-minute drive away. In the car, Valentina asked me, why didn't we just walk back on the beach? I was debating whether I should tell her the truth or if I should just make something up. I told her, "You're absolutely plastered right now. There's no way you're walking." She rolled her eyes. We got home and I helped her upstairs because I needed her to be quiet. I slept in her room that night because I didn't feel safe being alone downstairs near the beach. The next day came. I woke up with a feeling of having to throw up. I stayed in bed all day. I told Valentina and her parents that I just needed rest for a day. Then I would be able to function for the rest of the week. I woke up around 7 p.m. to Valentina knocking on my door. She told me they're going to downtown San Diego for dinner, but would be back before midnight. I nodded my head in agreement, then went back to sleep. I started to have a dream of someone tapping on a glass table rapidly. It was getting so annoying that I woke up. The tapping stopped. I turned on my side to face the exterior stairs, and that was when I saw it. I saw the guy from the pictures at the beach at my window, waving at me. He had a black hood on. He went running up the stairs, where I heard the front door open. I nearly screamed. Wasn't the front door locked? How was he in the house? I went to my door and put my weight on it. He wasn't getting in. I heard nothing. No one going down the stairs or anything. Then I heard someone on the other side of the door jerking the door handle. He was trying to put his weight into the door, but nothing was coming through that door. I heard him back away from the door. That's when I grabbed my phone and called 911. It took 5 minutes before I heard the police opening the front door. I decided it was safe to leave my room, and I booked it upstairs. But of course, the creep had left long before the cops showed up. Shortly behind the cops, Valentina's family showed up worried. They asked me if I was okay, but that wasn't what was important. I needed to make sure he didn't take or do anything. I heard a scream from Valentina as she went to her room. I followed her in. She pointed to a camera in the corner of the room. The police took it for investigation. The creep also took Valentina's clothes and bathing suits. I stayed for the rest of the week, but I'm still scared from that experience 2 months later. I don't know how that guy found us, or what his intentions were. I didn't know if he wanted me or Valentina, but most frightening, what would he have done if he did get into my room? My girlfriend and I took a trip to Palm Springs last year because we both needed a break from work and just wanted somewhere quiet where we could sit by a pool and relax. We found a modern-looking Airbnb that was about 15 minutes outside the main part of the city, kind of on the edge where the houses start getting more spaced apart and the desert starts taking over. It was a one-story house with big glass doors facing the backyard and a decent-sized pool. The listing said it was very private and good for couples. That was exactly what we wanted. We booked it for 4 nights. When we arrived, the place looked exactly like the photos. It was clean, modern, had white walls, concrete floors, basic furniture. The backyard had a pool, some lounge chairs, and one of those small storage sheds off to the side that I assumed was just for pool equipment. There was desert all around the back fence, and you couldn't really see any neighbors from the yard. The host never met us in person. We just got a door code. Everything felt normal the first day. We went out to dinner, came back, watched TV, and went to sleep. The first weird thing happened the first night, but it was small. Around maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, I woke up because I thought I heard something outside. It sounded like maybe a light thump or something hitting the side of the house. I just assumed it was the house settling or maybe wind. Desert areas get weird temperature changes at night, so I figured it was that. I went back to sleep. The second day, we mostly stayed by the pool. At one point, while we were laying on the chairs, I thought I heard what sounded like a voice somewhere far away. Not like someone talking normally, more like someone calling something out. I even asked my girlfriend if she heard it. She said she thought she heard something, but we both kind of laughed it off because there was basically nothing around us. There was no sidewalks, there was no foot traffic, it was just sand and scattered houses way off in the distance. We even joked it was probably just something dragging lightly against the outside wall near the bedroom. I got up and looked through the glass door, but didn't see anything. The backyard lights weren't on, and everything looked normal. I told her it was probably just branches or some animal. There were lizards and stuff around, so we didn't think much of it. Night 2, we again heard a couple sounds, but nothing that made us think someone was actually there. Just random ticks and small impacts that you could easily explain away. Night 3 was when everything changed. We had gone to bed around midnight, and I was still awake scrolling on my phone when I noticed light coming through the sides of the blinds. At first, I thought maybe a car drove by, but then it stayed on. I got up and looked through the edge of the blinds and saw one of the motion lights on in the backyard. I stood there for maybe 20 seconds, and then it shut off. About maybe 10 seconds later, another one turned on further down along the side of the house. That immediately made my stomach drop because it didn't feel random. It felt like something was triggering them in a path. My girlfriend asked what I was doing, and I told her I thought someone might be outside. She immediately sat up and got scared. We both watched as another light turned on near the back fence, then another closer to the pool. It really looked like someone walking around the outside of the house. She started telling me to close the blinds fully. She kept saying, "Shut them, shut them." I closed them completely, and we both just sat there quietly. I could tell she was genuinely scared. I was too, but I was trying not to show it, part of being a man in a relationship, I guess. She kept saying we should just ignore it and stay inside, but my brain kept going to the idea that someone could be trying to break in. I said I was going to go check outside just to make sure. She kept telling me not to. She actually grabbed my arm and told me that was a stupid idea. I told her I would just step out for a minute. I went into the kitchen and grabbed one of the bigger knives from the knife block. I didn't tell her this though, I didn't want to freak her out. I remember my hands actually shaking a little, which isn't normal for me. I opened the back sliding door slowly and stepped outside. It was dead quiet out there. I stood there for maybe a minute just listening. Then I walked slowly around the pool area, looking around the fence line and the corners of the house. I didn't see anyone. After maybe 5 minutes, I started thinking maybe I was just being paranoid and that maybe an animal had triggered the lights. Then I noticed footprints in the sand near the side of the house. They were very clear shoe prints, not animal tracks. This is when my heart started pounding. The prints went from the side of the yard toward the small shed that was next to the house. I followed them slowly, trying to be quiet. I remember thinking if someone was hiding, I didn't want to surprise them, but I also didn't want them surprising me. The footprints went straight to the shed door. When I got there, the doors were completely closed. The footprints just ended right in front of me. That was the moment I felt actual fear. Not just nervousness, real fear. I stood there, maybe 3 or 4 feet from the door, just staring at it. I couldn't hear anything at first. I took another step closer and just listened. I was trying to hear breathing or movement. For maybe 5 seconds, there was nothing. Then, very clearly from inside, I heard a man's voice say in a normal, calm tone, "Excuse me, could you open the door, please?" I froze completely. I didn't say anything. Then right after that, the same voice did this quiet, creepy laugh. A small laugh, like he thought something was funny. I didn't wait another second. I turned and ran straight back to the house. I slammed the sliding door shut and locked it. My girlfriend was already standing there asking what happened, and I was honestly struggling to get the words out because I was so freaked out. I told her there was someone in the shed and that he asked me to open the door. She immediately became hysterical, asking if I was serious. I told her, yes, unfortunately I am, and I grabbed my phone and called 911. While I was on the phone explaining everything, we saw the outside lights turn off again. Then about 15 seconds later, one of them turned back on. Then another, again like someone moving around the house. But now we couldn't see anything because the blinds were completely shut. That almost made it worse because we knew someone was out there, but couldn't see where. The dispatcher told us to stay inside and keep everything locked. It took about 20 minutes for police to get there because of how far out the house was. Those 20 minutes honestly felt like hours. Every little sound made us jump. When the police finally arrived, they knocked and announced themselves, and I've never felt more relieved to see the police, coming from someone who hates the cops. They checked the backyard first and then the shed. One of the officers told me to stay inside while they opened it. After a few minutes, they came back and said nobody was inside anymore. They asked me a bunch of questions about what exactly I heard and saw. I told them everything, including the voice and the footprints. They said it looked like someone may have been staying in there temporarily. They found some empty water bottles and food wrappers. One officer told us sometimes people hide in vacant properties or rental properties, especially in more isolated areas. He said the person probably left once they realized we had called the police. They recommended we not stay there that night, and probably not the rest of the trip either. Before we finished packing, one of the officers asked if either of us owned a dirty baseball hat he found pushed behind the couch. We both immediately said no. We went through the whole Airbnb multiple times, and we both knew for a fact that hat was not there before. The officer just kind of nodded and said it was possible the guy had gotten inside at some point, but we'd have no real way of knowing when. That honestly shook me almost more than the shed did, because it meant he might have been inside while we were there, maybe even while we slept. That was enough for us. We packed everything immediately. While we were packing, I tried messaging the Airbnb host multiple times explaining what happened and asking if they knew anything about someone accessing the shed. Every message showed as read, but he never responded. That honestly made it even creepier. No response, not even concern. We left and drove back toward the city and ended up staying at a cheap motel because it was the only thing available last minute. The next day, I contacted Airbnb support directly and explained everything and gave them the police report number. It took about a day of arguing, but they did refund us for the last unused night. We never heard from the host again. No apology or explanation or anything. We tried to still enjoy the rest of the trip and did some normal tourist stuff, but honestly, it kind of stuck with us the whole time. The worst part for me is just knowing someone had been right outside where we were sleeping for multiple nights, and we probably just kept dismissing the sounds as normal house noises. And I think about how calm that voice sounded when he asked me to open the door, like it was some joke to him, like he expected me to actually do it. And honestly, knowing now there was proof he had been inside the house at some point makes it even harder not to think about.